I've been flying FPV drones for nearly 4 years now. Throughout that time, I've learned from the best of the best through interviews, helped hundreds of people get into FPV drones, and have tried and tested all of the major parts of this hobby. But look, I don't want you to have to take 4 years to get to where I am, because I know it can be done so much faster. So I've taken everything that I've learned and have put it all into this one video. I'm going to show you the methods to get started on a budget, how to avoid the massive mistakes that most beginners end up making, and how to get flying as fast as possible. You're going to learn what the bare basics are that you need to start out with, the exact systems that I like to use to begin practicing, the best gear to buy when you're ready to fly that doesn't suck, how to actually do your first FPV flight, what you need to practice after that first FPV flight, the mistakes, money vacuums, and dangerous things that you must avoid, and how to continue on improving with your FPV journey using unfair advantages that I've learned along the way. I'm calling this whole thing FPV University, as it is really everything that you need to know. But look, sadly nothing is going to work if you don't understand where to start. That's why this first lesson is so damn important, and will show you what the absolute bare basics are to get started with FPV. So, sit back, relax, and discover why you may or may not want to splurge out your budget on FPV controllers in the beginning. How many times have you bought something that you thought would be absolutely perfect for you, only to find out later that there was a much better option and it was cheaper? Me too. I feel your pain. So in today's video, I've made it my mission to find out if buying expensive FPV controllers is actually worth your money, the best control options at every budget that'll last you a lifetime, and why buying the most expensive option might not actually be the best. Now, before we can do any of that, I need you to understand the 5 golden fundamentals of an FPV controller. If a controller ticks all of these boxes, then you know it's a solid controller, and if it lacks any of them, then you know what to be cautious of if you do go to buy it. Golden Fundamental 1 is usually one of those things that come along with spending more money, and make sure that when you pop the controller in your bag, it doesn't fall apart and that it will actually last you a long time. So, how is that achieved? Well, it's all to do with having a good build quality. That means the plastic isn't crap, the switches are solid, and the whole thing doesn't creak or crack when you hold it. Yeah, I've had way too many controllers do that to me. Okay, Golden Fundamental 2. Some controllers are simply stuck a bit in the past and, well, they just refuse to move on to newer technology. Think of it like your granddad who doesn't want to use a smartphone because he's used to using the home phone and swears by the fact that it still works. So it's a very similar state to that of a controller gimbal choice. Some controllers are still coming out with potentiometer gimbals, which, especially in more budget controllers, are known to wear out over time, have more jitter, and not have as smooth of a feeling when compared to newer technology. So, our second golden fundamental is that a controller should have Hall effect gimbals, which are gimbals that use magnets instead of physically touching tracks, making them dust and moisture resistant, and for the most part, a higher quality flying experience. Alrighty, our third golden fundamental is all about tackling one very important problem that we have seen occur over the years. As time moves forward, so does our development of technology and software, meaning that buying a controller that is locked into a particular radio protocol may not be the smartest solution. Golden Fundamental 3 is having a modular protocol support system, which is usually in the form of a module bay. That'll allow you 5 years in the future when we get some revolutionary radio protocol with crazy range to just be able to purchase the module, pop it into your controller, and not have to worry about buying an entirely new setup. This next golden fundamental is possibly one of the most important factors to consider for yourself. In fact, I would go as far as saying that without this fundamental, there is probably no point in you purchasing the controller at all. As I'm certain you understand, the controller is the one point of contact as such that we have with our drones, meaning alongside our goggles, it's the one thing we actually have attached to our body. You may have guessed it by now, but that makes Golden Fundamental 4 all about being comfy and ergonomic. If it sucks to hold, what is even the point? Okay, and for our fifth golden fundamental, we have to consider all ranges of skill levels. That means beginners and pros alike, but not quite in the way that you're probably thinking. When starting off, a beginner needs something that is simple to use and can connect to their favorite simulator to practice with. Similarly, a pro needs something that is streamlined and efficient and also hooks up to their favorite sim. The one thing that tackles both of these head on for this golden fundamental is USB-C, but not just any type of USB-C, one that specifically offers both charging and data transfer. That way it's a simple plug-in to charge up and an equally simple plug-in to go on a sim. Alrighty, so now that you understand the measurements that I'll be using to judge the controllers, let's introduce the handy or horrible chart. Controllers that have most of the golden fundamentals ticked off will go over here, whereas the controllers that don't, they'll be going over here. So let's start off with the cheapest and work our way all the way up to the most expensive. This first controller is the only one that I don't actually have with me in my hands today, and well, you'll see why shortly. This is the Beta FPV Light Radio 2 SE, and it comes in at a very compelling $45. Now, let's pull up the 5 golden fundamentals, starting off with good build quality. Surprisingly, this is actually a really well-built controller that feels amazingly solid and definitely feels above its price range, so it actually checks this one really easily. Unfortunately, however, this is where it all mostly stops being positive. It doesn't have Hall effect gimbals, there is no modular protocol support, and for me, being a pincher, it's not at all comfy to use. Its only redeeming factor is that it does have USB-C and allows you to charge and connect to the sim, but yeah, not looking so good for this little guy. To make matters even worse, this is actually one of the controllers that I personally owned when starting off, and I actually had the gimbals fail on me not just once, but twice in a matter of hours. To be clear, I had the non-SE version, but as far as I know, everything has remained the same with the gimbals in the new version, so this controller is going straight to the horrible side. Alrighty, next is this little guy, the Radio Master Pocket, coming in at $65. Now, I've also added these little stick extensions on, plus the required 2 18650 batteries, totaling us up to $83. So what do you actually get for that? Well, starting off, the build quality is pretty good. It's nothing to go crazy about, and it does feel a little bit cheap in the hands, but once you turn it on and see the LEDs inside and feel the vibration motor working, it doesn't seem too bad. Next, the gimbals. Although they are certainly quite small, they're still Hall effect, and by adding on these $3 extensions, I was surprised to see that they feel a lot more comparable to that of larger gimbals than I originally thought they would. They also tick off fundamentals 3 and 5 easily, offering a mini module bay on the back and separate ports for charging and sim use. That leaves us with fundamental 4 though. Just how comfy is this? Now, I've tried plenty of small controllers in the past and have honestly never really enjoyed holding on to them. The Radio Master Pocket is actually the first exception that I've found. This is remarkably ergonomic for me as a pincher, as I can actually rest it against my stomach or even just hold on to it thanks to its size and weight. It's definitely not my all-time favorite, but it does take the crown for compact radios. With that being said, I'm happy to introduce our first guest to the handy side. Alright, coming in as lucky number 3, we've got another Radio Master controller. This is the Boxer. This one does jump our price up to $140, which means we're now talking around twice as much as the last one, so can it offer twice as much more? Well, straight off the bat, as you've probably noticed, this particular Boxer has got some upgraded gimbals. But we are putting those aside right now and basing everything off of the stock gimbals, which I've got on another controller. When compared to the last two, this controller really does take it to another level with build quality. Everything feels super tight, solid, and just well built. Then, regardless of if you have the upgraded AGO1 gimbals like these, both the stock plastic gimbals and these ones are Hall effect full-sized gimbals, which I'm a massive fan of. Then, of course, if you flip it over, it casually just one-ups its younger brother with a sweet full-size module bay, which can come in handy if you ever need a larger and more power-hungry transmitter module. Now, you might be thinking, that's great and all, but how does it actually feel in the hands? And well, if I'm being totally honest here, it feels really bloody good. Like, oh my god, good. It strikes the perfect mix of size, not being too small that my hands feel like cramped, yet not so big that I can't just hold on to it without a neck strap. Finally, in what seems to be Radio Master fashion, we've got 2 separate USB-C ports, one for data transfer and one for charging. Again, it's not ideal as it really isn't that hard to combine the two, but at least they still have both. This one really does tick all of the boxes, no pun intended there, so it actually saves itself a solid spot on the handy side. We're only halfway through though, so how can it get better from here? Well, next up is the DJI Remote 2. This little guy pops our price right on up to $195, and based on our previous few controllers has really got a lot to live up to. If you aren't entirely familiar with DJI at this stage, they usually have some of the best features and qualities, but always leave out a super important fundamental or two. So let's change it up a bit and just start from the bottom of our fundamental list. USB-C data and charge? Check. Comfy ergonomics? Well, for the most part, I don't really love this game-style controller, but for its form factor, check. Modular protocol support? No. No, not at all. Being the usual apple of the drone hobby, everything is limited to that of DJI's ecosystem only. That means no support for anything other than the DJI transmission, and even then, limited capabilities as to what DJI drones it can actually work with. Hall sensor gimbals, on the other hand, though, check, although for the price they do feel a little bit small. Then finally, build quality. Also, another check. This is one of the things that DJI excel at, and realistically, it might be one of the smoothest yet high quality controllers we've seen yet. Thanks to the major limitations of protocols with this radio though, it makes it a super tough sell at this price, so I'm gonna have to put it right in the middle of handy and horrible. For just $5 more though, you can get your hands on this bad boy, which has been my go-to daily driver for the past 3 years. In saying that though, the Radiomaster TX16S, which comes in at $200, would not actually be my choice if I was starting out again. More on that later in the video though. In terms of hitting the fundamentals, it checks number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5. Where it does lack, however, is in its ergonomics. For some, the sheer amount of buttons and dials and switches, it's a little bit overwhelming. They're a must for some people. And if that is the case for you, then unfortunately you're gonna need a beefier and bulkier controller, which is exactly what the TX16S is. I don't feel like I can use it without at least sitting down and resting it on my knee, or at the very least with the aid of a neck strap. Its sheer size doesn't make the controller uncomfortable to use when I can do one of those things though, so it would be unfair to say that it completely fails this fundamental, hence why I'm giving it a half check and putting it over on the handy section. Now, this is where things go a little crazy. This next controller is not just twice the price of the TX16S, nor is it 3 times the price. No, this next controller is 5.5 times the price, coming in at $1,100. Obviously, a controller of this price is not for the average enthusiast. Instead, this thing must be revolutionary or at the very least look expensive for bragging rights. Just before I show you this controller though, I want you to think to yourself, if you were given the option to have this upcoming $1,100 controller or the $65 pocket radio for absolutely free, which one do you think you would pick? Alright, enough speculation. This controller right here. This is the most expensive controller I could get my hands on. It's the Futaba T18SZ. Now, I'm not sure about you, but this controller doesn't really look all that flashy and is low-key a bit of a disappointment. In saying this though, it is a 9-year-old controller.
9 years old? How the heck is that even relevant today then, Brody?
Well, it's all thanks to the fact that it's actually still being sold, brand new, by Futaba, so it's still a potential option to go for. But look, let's just run through our fundamentals list and see if this $1,100 controller can tickle the boxes. Although this doesn't look like an amazing controller because it's literally nearly a decade old, this absolutely ticks off the build quality fundamental. Everything still works surprisingly well, and even with its dated looks, it still feels modern and really high quality. Next, it does technically fail fundamental 2, as it uses potentiometer gimbals instead of Hall effect, but if Futaba is known for one thing, it's their quality, and these gimbals really are no exception. They feel great, they're still holding up well after 9 years, and will more than likely outlast most of the brand new cheap Hall effect gimbals. So I'll give it a full check here, as the sheer spike in quality does override the fact that they're behind on the technology. Then we get to move on to the modular protocol support side of things. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, but to explain it simply, there is no module bay on the back, so you're stuck using Futaba's specific protocol system, all of which happens to cost a lot as well. But in saying this, there is also the possibility to add on a Crossfire transmitter specifically, but you will need to do some tinkering, and in comparison to module bay ready controllers, this kinda just sucks. So I'm gonna give that one a half check. Unfortunately, it really doesn't hit the mark with Fundamental 4 either, being pretty much the exact same form factor as the TX16S. In fact, I think the TX16S might have actually been modeled off of this controller first. Anyways, that's all to say that it's still kind of, meh in the hands, and I'll give it another half check there. Then finally, just like every other controller so far, even the crappy light radio too, it's got both data and charging through USB-C. Wait, what's that? It doesn't even have a USB port at all? What? Yeah, you heard me right. Thanks to this controller's release only a year after USB-C was invented, it never got it, not even as an update over the past 9 years. Back in its day, this would have been the golden standard for radio controllers, and had Futaba updated its hardware and continued to provide high quality controllers with modern technology, they might very well still be worth buying today. Unfortunately, however, as you now know, This hasn't been the case, and it's perfect to show you just how picking the most expensive controller isn't always the best option. You would literally be better off with the pocket radio for over $1,000 less. So with all that laid out in front of us, it's pretty shocking to see the most expensive controller scored itself a 3 on the Golden Fundamentals scale. And well, you know what that means. Alright, now you might be thinking, with these 3 Radio Master controllers happily taking up the handy side, which one should you actually invest in? When I was first getting into the hobby, I found the cheapest controller possible, which at the time was the Emax EZ Pilot controller, and it was something like that. But I mean, hey, look, it cost $26. As to be expected though, this controller's gimbals failed on me pretty much immediately, so I upgraded to the lovely Beta FPV Light Radio 2 that we talked about earlier. We all know how that went, with 2 failed gimbals, which then prompted me to sink as much money as I had into a controller that wouldn't suck. At the time, my only real option was to jump all the way up to the TX16S, and to be honest with you, I really only have good things to say about it, considering the fact that it's lasted my rough lifestyle for the past couple of years. So, considering the fact that I've started at the cheapest end and worked my way all the way up to the most expensive end, these are going to be my recommendations. If you have a super tight budget, pick up the pocket radio. It's going to be the best bang for your buck, and you may honestly never need to upgrade from it. If, however, you just want the best of the best, it's between the TX16S and the Boxer. Even though right now I own the TX16S and that is my daily driver, if I was buying new today, I would swing towards the Boxer thanks to its size, and honestly, it just feels better than this one does. To add to that as well, if my budget allowed for it, I'd also have these upgraded AG01 gimbals installed too. Like, that may seem a bit overkill for some, but for me, I think it's just like the ultimate combo. Now, since making this video, I've actually gone ahead and sold my TX16S and bought a Boxer Crush, which has got those AG01 gimbals in it by default. I've now been flying with both the pocket radio and the Boxer radio, both of which I absolutely love. So I can confirm I stand behind my word. Something else I also stand behind is the fact that many people starting out in FPV do not have access to an awesome PC or a high-end computer. And that is exactly why in this next video I use my MacBook, which was criticized by so many, to test out every FPV drone simulator on the market. By the end of it, you'll know exactly what FPV drone simulator you should be buying, or if you're on a tight budget, what cheap FPV drone simulator you should spend your time on. These are the 11 most popular FPV drone simulators, and I've just spent the past week testing all of them. So today I'm going to show you which ones are truly worth the money, starting with the least expensive and moving all the way up to the most expensive. And then I'm going to rank them into 6 different categories so you know which one is best for you. First up is FPV Skydive. This is a completely free to download sim with the option of in-game purchases and is made by the company Orca. You know, the guys that made those epic looking goggles a little while back. Anyway, regardless, this is the best free sim that we have got available. It's got a racing mode, a challenges mode, a freestyle mode, and a multiplayer option as well, all of which really kicks the simulator off to a pretty smooth start. You will quickly, however, find its limitations, starting off with the fact that pretty much everything has got a paywall attached to it at some point. So you can only get access to a certain amount of races, a few maps, a couple of training lessons. Speaking of which, are not the best. The training program is super text heavy, meaning there is just a truckload of reading and a less than optimal amount of actual interaction. So yeah, it's nice to have it included, but it's not really a great way to get started. All up, it's hard to truly fault this as it is a completely free sim and it does offer a lot for being that. But nothing about the simulator is really amazing other than the cost of entry. 3 out of 10. Next is a pretty inaccessible simulator for many, but it's also free. Kind of. It's the DJI Virtual Flight Simulator. Now, the app itself is indeed free to download, but if you want to connect your remote up to it, you're going to need the DJI remote, which is going to cost you about $200. Let's say though, you get yourself one of those and, what else does the sim offer? Not much, in all honesty. The maps are super limited and the physics feel really floaty. The training program is certainly much better than that of FPV Skydive, but it teaches you how to fly using DJI's method, like double tap to arm. Again, not really something that I would recommend starting with. The only thing that is really going for the simulator though is the fact that if you've also got the DJI goggles, you can connect them up to the simulator and have a fully immersive, low latency experience, which is more fun than staring at a computer screen. But because of its massive controller limitation, it's in a very niche position. If you've already purchased the DJI controller, then sure, you probably could just download the sim and use it, but if you've just spent $200 on a remote, surely you can spare a few more dollars to get a much better sim. 2 out of 10. Alright, third on the list, and we've finally gotten to our first paid for simulator. This is the Curry Kitten FPV simulator, which costs a very affordable $2. Yep, that's cheaper than a cup of coffee. Now, if you can navigate yourself around the super unintuitive menu system, you'll find that you get the choice of 3 maps to either freestyle or race around in. The maps are a decent size and have got things like planes and cars to chase around, but if I'm being honest, that's really where the good things stop. The maps feel very empty with a massive lack of features, the racing is super limited to a few set racetracks, and there's no way to actually customize your real drone, let alone choose another one. To add a cherry on top, there is no training program, so you're limited to having to fly with external sources like YouTube. Now, being made by an individual FPV pilot right from our community, I have massive respect to Curry Kitten FPV launching this 4 years ago, but I do now feel like it's outdated and pretty limited in terms of what you can do within it. 2 out of 10. Okay, let's go for our next simulator, FPV Freerider, which comes in at $6. Being 3 times the price of the Curry Kitten simulator, I'd be expecting 3 times the value, but sadly, this is the home screen that you see as soon as you launch the sim. It really looks like it was created back in the early 2000s or something. Now, in regards to the actual simulator side of things, the maps are super small and have very little to do within them. The graphics are mediocre and there's no training program or customization of drones either. The only positive things I have to say is that the racetrack generator is a nice touch, you know, being able to create super basic racetracks for yourself. And the physics are the most realistic so far, but other than that, this simulator is a big no-go for me and feels like the most outdated and most expensive simulator yet. 0.5 out of 10. Thankfully, the 5th simulator might actually be here to save the day. That sim being DRL, which costs $10. This is the first FPV simulator that truly feels like a lot of time and effort was put into it straight from the first impressions. It's the most feature-rich simulator so far, having a whole bunch of things to do, and some very unique game modes that you won't be able to find anywhere else. Starting from the super intuitive main menu, you can access freestyle, racing, training, live tournaments, multiplayer, and a physics modifier too. More on that in a moment. In terms of the maps, you really are going to struggle to get bored of them as there are 29 completely different maps, all of which have a bunch of features or racetracks built into them. If you did get bored, then you can race on one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of community-made tracks with either a totally custom drone or again, a community-made one. Now, if you're really up for a challenge, this simulator offers it. In fact, if you're good enough, you could actually become a real-life racing champion from it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is a DRL tournament where some of the best FPV pilots in the world compete against each other in real life, and it gets broadcast out to a bunch of places. The fact that you literally can compete within the simulator to become the next DRL competitor is a crazy cool concept. So there's that, if that floats your boat. It literally gets even better though. Within the simulator, there is a very easy to follow, super well explained training program that covers everything from complete noob to full flying acro. It's actually the way that I learned how to fly over 4 years ago now, and I just recently used this exact training program to teach my friend Tyron how to fly as well. Then, the last thing to rave on about too is the physics modifier. This is a complete process where you can take a real deep dive to adjust the physics across the entire simulator and tweak them to exactly your liking. For me, the process isn't really something that I'm super interested in, so I'll be judging the physics based on how it comes fresh from the download. At this stage, you might be wondering, well damn, where does it start to lack then? And in all honesty, it feels like it's a bit behind in terms of graphics. Like, they're not terrible, but as you'll soon see, they really aren't super good either. So overall, the customization and variety within the sim really give it a great edge, and the fact that it comes in at $10 makes it an amazing choice for beginners as well as pros. 8 out of 10. Now, it might seem like that's going to be a really difficult simulator to beat, but it's important to keep in mind that the next 6 simulators cost even more. Let's look into one of the more popular freestyle sims, Uncrashed. It cost $15, and when I first opened up my menus, my hopes were set immediately low. However, as soon as I opened up the first map, absolutely everything changed. I have seriously never seen graphics this good ever in an FPV simulator. The cherry on top here too is just how damn well it runs on my MacBook, which, as you'll find out soon, isn't always the case. Anyways, you get the choice of 19 completely different maps, all with things to do within them, so if freestyle and free flight is your thing, you're going to have a really hard time getting bored with this. Combine the realistic graphics and physics that feel close to what DRL offers, and you've got a pretty good look and feel. Where you might struggle though is with the racing element. It does exist and there are different tracks within each map, but that's what you're limited to. There are no multiplayer races against your friends, no making your own maps, and overall it does feel limited for racing. The other limitation though is the lack of a training program. Like, if this simulator included a solid program to learn in these stunning environments, wouldn't that just be the best? But nope, there's nothing. This sim certainly feels like it would be a good purchase for experienced pilots who are maybe just a bit bored of the usual sims, kind of like me, and just want to jump into something super fun. 6.5 out of 10. Now, similar to Uncrashed, but coming in at $16, is the AI Drone Simulator. Now, it would be pretty easy to think that this is a really modern sim thanks to having AI in its name, but when you open up that first main menu, I think you'd be able to figure out pretty quickly that that is not the case. The entire experience in this sim is very close to what Uncrashed offers, with plenty of maps at high detail and a focus on freestyle flying. The differentiating fact here though is you can actually download community-made drones and make your own, which is a nice touch that seems to be missing from a lot of the previous simulators. Where this simulator let me down though is with how it handles the graphics. It's not nearly as smooth as Uncrashed, meaning I have to lower the graphics to get it to perform well, which is counterintuitive to what its biggest positive is. It's honestly rendered a little bit obsolete with Uncrashed upping it on nearly every aspect just a little bit, and without any major standout features aside from community-made drones and maps, it's actually a hard one to recommend in 2024. 5 out of 10. Next up is one that you might be a bit more familiar with, Trip FPV. This sim costs $17, unlike the previous two, offers stunning graphics. One of the literal biggest selling points of this simulator is the map size and the attention to detail. Like, seriously, these maps are so freaking huge that if your computer isn't a good gaming computer, you won't be able to handle it. Much like me, using my M1 MacBook, which is not a gaming computer. This simulator really struggles to run smoothly at any rate. It does offer an M1 and M2 experimental version to run on my MacBook, which is supposed to give it an increase in performance, but instead, for me at least, it just made my game crash and didn't actually give me any noticeable increase anywhere. Performance aside for a moment though, this simulator builds on top of its biggest feature, the graphics, and continues to strive towards being a solid sim for all. We've got some really cool racing tracks, plenty of settings to change how the drone flies, and the physics too. There's even a training program too, which you'd think would immediately make me happy, right? Unfortunately, this is possibly one of the worst programs that we've seen yet. So bad in fact that if a beginner did purchase this and try to learn using that program, I don't think that there would actually be much hope for them ever trying a game. There are spelling mistakes straight off the bat, no toning down of sensitivity, and to be honest, even I struggled to complete the first few parts of the lessons. Seriously, I think it would just be better if this program was removed altogether, or better yet, totally revised to be something so much more comprehensive. Another note of disappointment too is that there are still only 4 maps to fly, which yes, are massive, but I can't help but feel limited when Uncrashed and AI Drone both offer so many more. So yeah, this feels like it has so much potential, but is let down by how poorly it runs on my MacBook, the lack of map choices, and especially the training program. 5.5 out of 10. So far, we've had 8 simulators and only DRL has gotten close to being a 10 out of 10 perfect simulator. As we move into the most expensive 3 simulators, I'll be keeping their price in mind and comparing them back to the many good sims that we've had for much lower costs. Starting off the more costly 3 with Liftoff at $20. Just to remind you that this is now twice the price of DRL, so it's got a lot to live up to if it wants to compete. Thankfully, starting out, we do have the best user interface I've seen yet, which is simply the easiest to use and navigate through. In the menu, you'll find tons of features like racing, freestyle, free flight, multiplayer, track builder, drone builder, and a training program. Whew, feels good to have a bit of competition again, right? Now, if we have a look into the actual experience, you'll find graphics that are good and really well optimized, a solid base of physics too, and plenty of features to mess around in inside of the maps. If you want to introduce moving objects like cars around the racetrack, then you'll need to purchase the additional slipstream pack for $4, which feels a little bit meh considering you get those features included in cheaper sims, but regardless, it does provide a whole lot more to do and fly around with. The maps themselves are pretty big and seem similar to DRL size, possibly even a little bit bigger, but there are fewer maps and it does feel limited by them just a little bit. The freestyle mode, however, is something I freaking love, and I have no idea why it's not included in more simulators. I know what you're thinking now.
What do you mean, Brody? All the simulators have freestyle mode in them where you get to fly around and do what you like.
And you're right, but in Liftoff, freestyle mode is totally different to free flight mode. In Liftoff's freestyle mode, you get a set time limit to hit as many tricks, features, and close calls as you can on any given map. You get rewarded points for every trick, and it really brings a game feel to freestyle, similar to the payoff that you get when beating a race time. What else is nice and rewarding though is the training program. Finally. Last time I tested this program out, it linked you to YouTube videos and was really not a good way to start out. Now, however, it's totally revamped and is a purpose-built introductory training program. Massive kudos to Liftoff for putting in the extra effort with the animation here too. Now, although I'm not personally a massive fan of the methods it uses for teaching newbies, line of sight, I do think that it's the only other training program that I would actually recommend someone to use alongside DRL. My main gripe with the simulator, however, is the fact that there is really no standout feature. Everything is simply just good. Like, the racing is good, but it lacks an intuitive track guide like DRL. The graphics are good, but don't come close to that of Uncrashed or Trip. The freestyle and free flight are good, but the maps feel limiting. You can probably see where I'm going with this one. It feels like a really well-rounded, jack-of-all, master-of-none simulator at a fair price for what it offers. 8.5 out of 10. This next sim, however, is not a jack-of-all whatsoever. This one is Velocidrone, and it comes in at $22. Why I started off by saying it's not a jack-of-all is simply because this simulator feels very purpose-built and very specifically tailored towards one type of pilot. That pilot being a racer. It's got the best multiplayer and racing interfaces around, the physics are the closest to real life out of any simulator, and the map building is simply amazing. I'd say that if you're after a simulator that is going to give you the most transferable skills from sim to reality, this is probably the one to go for. Where it excels in its racing aspects, it does fall short in nearly every other area, which is actually okay considering it's not trying to be an all-in-one simulator. Now, there are a few other packs to purchase additionally, just like Liftoff, to add race cars to the racetrack, except this one costs $6, which would then take the total cost up to $28. It's kind of at the point where I would say I'd opt for another simulator with moving features included and better graphics, kind of like Uncrashed. Basically though, if you're a strict racer or want the most transferable skills, this is probably the simulator for you. If, however, you aren't into racing, then I'd probably steer very well clear of it. 6 out of 10. Okay, time for our final and most expensive sim before we crown the winners of our 6 categories. Introducing DCL The Game, coming in at a whopping $30. Now, I specifically say that this is DCL The Game and not DCL The Sim because that's what it's actually called, and I've started to understand why they've gone that route. Instead of striving to be the best simulator at any one thing, they've gone for a totally different approach and made this feel like as much of a gaming experience as possible. Think nearly any car racing game, but now switch the cars out for drones. That's what this is. Instead of building drones and making it feel realistic, you instead have to win races to earn in-game money, with which you can then buy new drones to fly. There are also a load of different racetracks, and it feels like a slightly better version of DRL in terms of the competitive racing element. The graphics are solid too, and look great. It feels like DRL racing, but in a trip environment. What is very apparent, however, is the fact that this game costs $30, which, for what you get, is pretty damn expensive. In fact, I'd say it's much too expensive for what it offers when you compare it to all the other sims. However, it does feel like more of a game rather than a sim. So if you're looking for a drone sim with a purpose, like racing to win in-game money to then buy a new drone, this really is the only option that offers that. It does so with great graphics, making it a decent amount of fun, but you are limited to just racing. There's no training program, and the freestyle modes are really certainly limited in terms of what the maps offer feature-wise. 5 out of 10. Alright, that is all the sims covered, so the time has come to rank them in 6 different categories to make sure that you leave this video knowing exactly which sim is best for you. Now, if you're looking at what sim to get, I think it would be fair to say that you're looking to improve your drone flying skills, right? If that is you, I've got just the perfect thing. Every couple of weeks, I send out my newsletter to hundreds of other FPV pilots to help them improve their skills in every aspect of our hobby. So to make sure you don't miss out on any future tips and tricks, head down to the first link in the description and sign up now. I'll wait. Okay, we good? Good. Let's rank these sims. Our first category is the best choice for beginners. This is the sim that I can easily recommend to anyone looking to start off from nothing, learn how to fly, and grow their skills through multiple different aspects. The winner here is DRL. It simply offers the most comprehensive training program for anyone looking to get started. Like, you could have never flown anything in your life and you'd be able to learn through this one. Furthermore, there's plenty to do after you've learned how to fly, and you can tackle either one of the big sides of the hobby, freestyle or racing, right within the simulator. The best part, aside from the training program, is the price. Being just $10, it's pretty accessible and kind of offers the most bang for your buck. I do, however, have a run-up here as well. This one simply lacked the budget price and had a slightly higher level of entry to the training program. That simulator is Liftoff. Okay, the second category is the best choice for realistic physics. This is the sim that is going to be the best choice for those who want the most realistic feeling simulator above all else. The winner here is Velocidrone, and I'm sure you can understand why. Although it only offers solid racing, it really does provide you with the most transferable skill set possible thanks to the physics. Our run-up for this category is, funnily enough, Liftoff yet again. It's not nearly as close to reality as Velocidrone is, but for the most part it does feel less floaty than all the other sims, and the second closest to real life. I do also want to add an honorable mention for DRL though, as having an entire mode to adjust your physics to exactly how you want them is pretty special. Alright, our third category is the best high performance graphics. This is for the simulator that looks the best and runs those amazing graphics well on my MacBook M1. The winner here is Uncrashed. Honestly, hats off to the developers of this one. The stunning graphics combined with the silky smoothness of the flight experience is like nothing I've ever flown before. I am going to throw a small curveball in here though and say that the runner-up is Trip. Now, I can't say much positive about it for running the graphics well on my MacBook, but I have heard of and seen other pilots running everything maxed out on their gaming computer, and it really is a league ahead of all the other simulators too. Too bad, it still doesn't run on my computer. It might have stolen the position of winner if it did. Alright, next up is category 4, the best choice for racing. There was certainly a bit of competition in this one with DRL, DCL, and Velocidrone all competing heavily here, but I have chosen the one that nearly every racer would swear by, and that one is Velocidrone. It's by far the most robust racing simulator and holds the strongest community for racing too. My runner-up here though is slightly interesting though. I've actually chosen DCL. Now, I think DCL takes the runner-up position because it's actually a really fun simulator for racing. The fact that you have a reason to play and race is a pretty strong factor there too. Okay, and for the fifth category, we have the most fun simulator. I totally get that this is going to be a very personal opinion, as what is fun differs for everyone, but for me personally, the most fun that I've ever had on any simulator is Uncrashed. The graphics, performance, maps, and insane amount of things to do really do add up to be a super fun experience. Like, I genuinely had to remind myself that I was there to test out every simulator and not spend too long messing around on it simply because I was enjoying my time way too much. The run-up for this one though was actually a little bit harder though, as Uncrashed stood out so far from the competition for me, it was an easy pick. Runner-up, however, does go to DRL. I've chosen it because it would be seriously difficult for me to get bored with the hundreds of different tracks and maps. The graphics are pretty good, meaning I don't feel like it's lacking, and there's just a ton to do. Alright, that now brings us to our final category, the best overall choice. This takes absolutely everything into consideration, from price to graphics to features in game, and from my testing, I can confidently say that the best choice overall does not have many standout features. Instead, it simply excels at providing a good experience all around, doesn't lack in any one area, and is really easy to use. The winner today is Liftoff. As I mentioned earlier, it's a jack of all, master of none, which when looking for an overall winner is exactly what I was after. There is only one other simulator that came slightly close to competing for this category, so I'm naming it runner-up for the best overall, and that one is DRL. It's more geared towards racing, but overall feels like the only other simulator that offers everything at a solid level, especially for its price. Since making that video, Uncrashed has actually had a pretty decent update too. It's now got an improved main menu alongside the welcomed addition of multiplayer. It still doesn't up the ranking for me in terms of recommending it to a beginner. However, if it's in your budget and you want to have some fun, good lordy, it is well worth it. So Now that moves us on to the second module. Within this module, you'll be learning my experience-based method to actually start out with practicing and beginning to learn how to fly. By the end of it, you'll know what you need to learn, how to learn it easily, and you'll be prepped up, ready for your first flight. Have you ever wondered what the easiest, fastest, and cheapest way is to start flying FPV drones? Well, today I'm going to show you my 5-step party system to start flying along with the best budget gear to buy to get the job done. So, in order to be able to show you all of this in the easiest way possible, first I need to introduce you to your new best friend, the party system. Let's break it down and show you just how it's going to help out. First up, we have the P. P stands for purchase, and it's the essential first step of the system. In fact, without taking this step seriously, you could very well blow massive amounts of money and build up frustration faster than Usain Bolt's 100-meter sprint in the 2012 Olympics.
Man, here comes Usain Bolt! Usain Bolt storming through, he takes it again!
Trust me, I would know a thing or two. Well, about frustration, that is, not about sprinting at all. Oh, hell no. So, what the heck do you need to complete this first step? Well, honestly, it comes down to either purchasing or finding 3 simple things, with the first being a computer. It doesn't matter if it's a Mac, Windows, Linux, a gaming PC, or just a standard laptop. Most will do the job, obviously. Some are going to do them slightly better than others. But the second thing that you're going to need to figure out is what FPV drone simulator you're actually going to purchase. Now, I've made an entire in-depth video on what the ultimate FPV drone simulator is, so if you want to make up your own mind on that, head on over and watch that. But if you're sticking to this system, I've got you sorted. All you need to do is purchase the DRL simulator. It's regularly on sale, but at most it's going to cost you something along the lines of $10, so it's pretty hard to go wrong here. That then leads us on to our third thing to either purchase or at the very least see if you can borrow. That thing is, of course, an FPV controller. If you're able to score an older one off of a friend, then by all means, utilize the crap out of it. If, however, you're like me and aren't quite so lucky, then your next best bet is to buy this controller here, the Radio Master Pocket ELRS version. Also, don't forget to buy the batteries with it, as I would seriously hate to see you get all excited about using your new controller, only to be disappointed when you end up missing out the batteries. Okay, so that leaves us with a computer that has the DRL simulator downloaded to it, with an FPV specific controller ready to roll as well, all of which leads us perfectly onto the next letter in our party system. Yep, that means we're talking about A, which in this case stands for action. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What action and, oh my English. What action, why can't I say this word? What action am I supposed to take that's going to be easy, fast, and cheap? And you know what? That's a totally valid question, because right now, nothing is going to seem easy, cheap, or fast, but that's where this part of the system kind of comes in to save the day. All you need to do is open up the DRL simulator on your computer, plug your controller in, and get yourself comfortable. From inside the DRL menu, click into Train, Onboarding, Beginner Mode, and then Learn to Fly. You'll need to follow the entire beginner course, which is going to take some time, after which you do also need to move on to the intermediate course too. These 2 onboarding programs are going to teach you the basics of drones and then move you into the full manual FPV experience. And look, you're going to have to trust me when I say this is going to be one of the most frustrating things that you've done in a long while. And no, I'm not saying that to scare you or anything. Simply, I just need to remind you that learning something new is ultimately really difficult until you've done it a few times, in which case it's not really something new. So if you want to give yourself the easiest and best chance of this, I'd say give this section about 2 weeks minimum, and that's going to let things sink in and make your life ultimately easier. It's certainly possible to get it done faster, as you'll see later on, but I'm just not recommending it. So that then moves us on to the R in our party system. You almost certainly would have found some challenging sections or movements within the past 2 weeks, possibly even still find controlling the drone in a full manual mode is a challenge as well. Whatever it is, it's totally okay. The R stands for repeat, and it's where we actually take another dive back into those extra challenging sections or movements and, well, retry them. It may not feel easy or even less frustrating, but by repeating these challenges, you're actually slowly developing those weaker points and building them back up. Alongside this, make sure you try out some new maps within DRL too. The more variety you can give yourself, the better, and it's going to be so much nicer for you in the long run, as realistically, you aren't actually going to be flying in the exact same environment every time you go out to fly in real life. If you find you want some more realism with your sim flying too, you can always add another simulator to the mix like Uncrashed or Trip, both of which will work to varying degrees on different computer systems. I find my MacBook handles Uncrashed really freaking well, but Trip absolutely terribly. It's always a point of controversy though, so DRL is usually pretty smooth on most systems, hence why I recommend it so highly. It's a happy medium. Now, once you've done a good few weeks of training and repeating challenges, it's then time for a bit of a test to see if you're actually ready to fly a drone. That's why the T in the PARTY system stands for Trial Test. So, what exactly do you need to do in order to put your newly curated skills to the test? Well, the test is split into two halves, both of which you'll need to be really fully comfortable with before you try to move on. Patience and practice is really going to save your wallet in the long run. Trust me, I would know that. Anyways, part one of the trial test is to be undertaken in a freestyle map, ensuring that you're in pro mode as well. So to get there, head to the fly option, then freestyle, click originals, and then choose between either Mega City, Campground, US Air Force, Boneyard, Gates of New York, or Out of Service. It really doesn't matter which one you pick. I'm just suggesting these maps as they're all nice and large and they all offer plenty of things to do and fly around within them. Now, once you've picked your map, click into it, then go to the freestyle option, then finally, make sure you're on pro mode before hitting that start button. Okay, so here's where the first half of the test really truly starts. What I need you to do is bring yourself up to a hover, not too far from the ground, fly yourself forward for about 2 seconds, slow down, then fly backwards to where you started and land the drone in a similar position to where you took off. Now, I want you to do the exact same thing again, but instead of going forward and backwards, go to your right. So that means up into a low hover, tilt to the right for about 2 seconds, slow down, then tilt back to the left to bring your drone back to where you started, ending the move with a nice soft landing. Repeat the same exercise going backwards, and then after that going to the left. If you can nail all 4 directions, including keeping your height from the ground the same throughout the whole move, then you're ready to tackle the last half of the test. If, however, you find you're really struggling with the control, then it's a good time to just take a moment. Don't get too frustrated. I know how pissed off I felt when trying to do this stuff for the first time, hence why I'm saying this, but now is a good time to just take a step towards improving your skills that little bit more by going through the repeat stage once again. If you're finding all of this way too easy though, that's great news for you because it means moving on to the second half of the test. For this, I want you to start off the exact same way that you did for the first half in either the same or another choice of a large map. Now, I want you to actually imagine that this is really the real deal right now. Really try to make yourself believe that if you crash this drone on this flight, you're actually going to break something and that is going to be coming straight out of your wallet. Now, I get it. You might be thinking,
But Brody, that is absolutely ridiculous. That's the reason that we actually fly in a simulator so things don't break.
and well, hey, you're damn well correct. However, our next stage after this isn't within a simulator, so I'm just wanting to prepare you as much as possible. Anyways, back to the test. With this new mindset at the forefront of your thoughts, I want you to take off reasonably cautiously and try to fly around for 5 minutes straight, keeping close to the ground and other objects, but really making sure you aren't crashing at all. If you're feeling overly confident, feel free to hit some gaps here, but realistically, if I was in your position, I wouldn't be trying that sort of thing just yet. Now, once you've nailed that 5-minute flight of exploring without crashing once, bring your drone back into land at the exact same spot that you took off at, trying to keep the landing smooth as well. If you manage to smash that test out, then honestly, congrats. I seriously think that you're ready for the 5th stage of the PARTY system. It's a similar story to before, however, if you couldn't quite manage the full 5 minutes of control, go back through the repeat stage again. Truthfully, there's nothing wrong with going back and repeating. You're only going to benefit yourself, your wallet, your time, literally everything. Just drop the ego and go back to that repeat stage. Trust me. Alright, so now you've got the skills tried and tested, it's time for the most enjoyable and rewarding stage yet. We've now got stage Y, which in this system stands for yeet that shit. Now, what I mean when I say that is really buy your first FPV drone, pop on a pair of FPV goggles, and go out to a nice large space to have your first ever real FPV flight. Of course, by saying this, you're now left wondering, well, great, I need to get myself an FPV drone, but have no freaking clue what to buy. Well, good news, I've got you sorted. This next module, number 3, covers what gear you need to be buying to get your ass flying. How good was that? Also, I just wanted to throw it out there that ever since buying this old man mask, we have had multiple times we have scared the living crap out of each other in our house. I mean, hold on a second.
Yep, that's scary.
Proves my point. It's freaking terrifying, but I highly recommend it. Anyways, back on track here. Just before we can go through exactly what you should be buying, you first need to figure out if you'd actually be better off buying a pre-built FPV drone or if you might actually benefit from building straight from the get-go. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you need to be doing and what your next steps are to take. For my first 2 years in the FPV drone hobby, I only ever bought pre-built FPV drones. In fact, it wasn't until the beginning of 2023 that I finally decided to start building my own. And now that I've spent my fair share of time with both drone types, I've actually got some findings that I'm going to be sharing with you. So in today's video, I'm going to run you through which one's the better choice in terms of build quality, which one is the easiest to own, and then finally, which one you should pick if you're unsure of where to start. But first, if you're on a budget and you're thinking which one's cheaper, there's generally only one option for you to take. For example, if you went the route of buying a pre-build, you'd be purchasing equipment that has already been soldered together, tuned up, and tested to make sure it's a complete and functioning drone. If, however, you decide to go and build them for yourself, you'll be sourcing the individual parts and then putting the time and effort into building it all from the ground up. Generally speaking, the actual FPV drone parts themselves are all going to be similarly priced, so if you were to buy a pre-built FPV drone for $400 and then later try and build the exact same drone yourself, buying all the parts separately and all, you're going to find out that the DIY build comes out significantly cheaper. What's happening here is because you don't have to build it and instead somebody else's, you're paying for their time and skills. So unless your time is super valuable to you and you can justify the additional cash for the same spec drone as a pre-build, then buying all the parts yourself and putting the work in is going to be the cheapest entry in here. A side note to keep in mind though is that if you don't have the necessary tools like a soldering iron or even screwdrivers that are essential for a build, then there is actually a chance that buying a pre-built FPV drone might be the cheaper option initially for you. What's not going to be cheap though is if the build quality sucks and you end up spending more time trying to fix up mistakes or repair broken parts. First, we have the build quality in relation to the pre-builds. There have been a few occurrences where FPV drone manufacturers put out FPV drones that are pre-built for sale that are just really not worth your time or your money. Whether this be because the design is terrible, the electronics are outdated, or just simply if the manufacturer has a bad reputation and doesn't solder things together properly, whatever it is, it's a bad trap for beginners to fall into. Thankfully, there are a few things you can do while researching to find out if you're about to fall into a trap or not. Let's take this here as an example from the good side. This is my iFlight Nazgul Evoke pre-build. I bought it over 2 years ago now and have raved about it pretty much non-stop. Why? Because it's possibly the best drone I have in my entire 12 drone collection. It's gained its title to me by taking on hundreds of crashes without breaking a thing, recovering from a complete underwater submersion, and never having any issues in regard to electronic failures until super recently when the flight controller finally decided to give in. And honestly, fair play to it, especially after the underwater mission. I reckon that probably played a big part in the situation. Anyway, my point here is that this pre-built FPV drone is an amazing quality drone, both externally and internally, making it a great value for money purchase that honestly couldn't have left me any happier. I bought it because I'd seen so many other FPV YouTubers recommend it, and after reading about it online, I decided to pull the plug and send it. On the flip side to this though, we can take a look at the original DJI FPV drone. There are going to be a few people who tell you this is an amazing drone, and sadly, they usually don't know much better, so to them, it truly is. The issue here is that when you compare the cost of a drone like the DJI FPV with the iFlight Nazgul, it's probably one of the worst drones you could buy for the price. It's proven to not be durable in crashes, it's super underpowered for its weight, and main repairs can't be made by yourself, so you have to send it to DJI, which then costs a whole lot more than what it's actually worth. Both options are pre-builds, and they both offer similar convenience factors for getting started, but it all boils down to the factor of who you buy your pre-builds from and also the research that you do beforehand to make sure you end up with the best quality possible. Then, however, we have build quality in relation to a DIY build. If you've previously been into soldering and building electronics, then this might very well be a super easy factor to just forget about. However, if you're anything like I was and you really don't know what you're getting yourself into, there's a whole lot of variables that come into play for the quality of your build. Starting off with the research phase. Are you buying the best value equipment to build with, like Are you making sure that it's actually going to last? Are you making sure that it has good reviews? Are you making sure it's what you actually need? Then you move on to the building phase. Similar story, of course. Are you soldering proper connections? Are you making sure you aren't being too rough when installing things? Have you missed any components? Then finally, the setup phase. Have you ever used Betaflight before? If you haven't, are you making sure that you're changing every setting necessary, etc., etc., etc.? You get the point, right? Every little thing is up to you. And so that means that if something isn't working as it should be, that there's pretty much always going to be on you, unless there is the rare case that something's failed from the manufacturer, but that is very rare. Your build is only going to be as high quality or low quality as every little bit of effort that you put into it from start to finish. So this one all comes down to that factor of skill level and also doing your due diligence with researching beforehand. So far though, both of these sound like they have a bit of work involved in them if you want to choose right. So at the end of the day, what's actually easier for the vast majority of beginners? If you thought I was going to say pre-builds, you're wrong. Well, kinda. I actually think building your own drone is a skill that's required at some point down the road to, be able to complete repairs or even change things up that you don't like. But why does that make it the easier option? You see, with FPV, as much as I wish it could be a bit more straightforward for beginners, it really will always try to throw a curveball at you when you're least expecting it. Take my day-to-day as an example. The plan was simple. Go out for some drone racing training with a few of my mates and have some fun. So of course, packed everything. Went and set up a few gates and then plugged a battery into my DIY race drone. I got the usual startup chime, but no secondary ESC chime, which means something was up. To cut a long story of pulling apart a drone in the back of a car short, the flight controller inside the drone, which is one of the main components, was completely fried and wasn't starting up. Totally random, as it was working before I left the house and then now it wasn't. I've now got a new flight controller on the way. I'll need to install that to get my drone up and flying again. Thankfully, because I built this drone, I actually know how to do everything and I know what I need to do to replace every part. If, however, this had happened to me with a drone I'd bought as a pre-build, man, I'd seriously have no blooming idea what to do next. In fact, I wouldn't have had a clue about what had actually stopped working, let alone trying to figure out how to fix it. From that point, you'd then be led down like a rabbit hole of having to learn the skills you need to repair it yourself, and you'd also face the challenge of having no clue what you're working with. Had you built the drone from the ground up though, yes, it would still be a pain, but at the very least, you know what you need to do to fix it, and you'll most likely have an understanding of how to do so. In saying all of that though, don't let yourself be put off pre-builds so quickly. For beginners, pre-built FPV drones are something that I highly lean into and recommend on the daily. If they're such a pain in the butt to fix, then why on earth am I such an advocate for them, you might be thinking? Well, when I was getting started, the thought of having to build my own drone actually repelled me, like genuinely repelled me. I really didn't want to invest the time nor the money into the tools and skills needed to build. So I started off simply with a pre-built kit, which made things literally as easy as possible and got me flying in little to no time. Things certainly went wrong along the way, and I had plenty of challenges that highly probably could have been avoided if I had understood what I was working with. But at the end of the day, without pre-built FPV drones, I wouldn't be a part of this amazing hobby, sharing my experiences here with you guys. Speaking of which, every 14 days I actually share exclusive tips, challenges, and solutions with over 100 other beginner FPV drone pilots in my email newsletter. Everything that I send out is all stuff that I wish I'd known earlier in my FPV journey, so if you want to sign up and become a better drone pilot in just 5 minutes a fortnight, it's totally free. There's a link down in the description box below. So you might be beginning to wonder, what's actually the best option to take? Look, for me, getting starting was overwhelming as hell and super daunting. All I wanted to do was fly a drone down a waterfall and do the cool tricks and stuff that I'd seen on Instagram. I already knew that there was a massive learning curve for actually flying the drone, and that was a big enough task to think about having to do, let alone the thought of trying to find what parts and equipment I needed to go buy, and then figuring out how the heck it all goes together. And so that's exactly why I chose to go the pre-built route, and I'm sure there are a few of you who might be feeling similar to me. However, if that's not the case, and you're a keen tinkerer, then by all means building a drone is going to be one of the most rewarding and challenging things for you to do. I can't even explain how amazing it felt when I built my first FPV drone and then took it outside for its first flight. I was just standing there, so stoked with myself, and just so happy that somehow I'd made something that actually flies. It's worth mentioning that more so than ever, pre-built FPV drones are simply getting better and better every day. We have more options, more budget ranges, more quality, and of course, more choices. That is such an awesome thing to be able to say, but I'm also super aware that it's equal parts terrifying for beginners. I mean, damn, when I was starting out, I had no clue what to buy and actually ended up wasting my money on multiple drones that really were not what I wanted. But we'll get to that in one of the upcoming modules shortly. For now, this next video is going to run you through everything you could possibly need to get yourself up and running to fly. The best part too is that it's broken down into specific budget ranges starting at $100 US, going all the way up to $1,800 US. So there really is an option in there for everybody. There has never been an easier and cheaper time to get started with FPV drones than right now. It's actually so damn easy and cheap that it's become a really difficult choice of where beginners should even start out. So in today's video, I'll be showing you exactly what FPV gear you should buy depending on your budget and everything you need to get up and flying. I'm starting off with a complete drone bundle at $100 US and moving my way up in price by another $100 US each time. That way you're always going to have an option to choose from no matter where your budget sits. I do want to say too that I'm utilizing this exact same system that Matt Poshwat created in his video 3 years ago. The difference being that everything has gotten upgraded and, well, cheaper since then, so that's only great news for you. However, before I can show you any of these bundles, you first need to understand exactly what's required for a drone bundle to work seamlessly together. Think of these bundles as a gaming console of your own choice. I'll be using a PlayStation, of course, just because it's the better option, but now our gaming console has got 5 major parts to make it all function properly. First, we have the console itself, which is the powerhouse to your whole setup, and it's actually the one thing that's going to give you all the fun that you're after. Different types of consoles offer exclusive games and experiences that simply aren't possible with other types of consoles. All of this is the exact same as an FPV drone itself. Some drones can do things that others can't, and not every drone is going to cater for everybody's needs. That's why today I have based every choice off of drones that I personally have tested and would now buy if I was at that budget level again. Next, we've got the game controller. It's what you use to navigate and control everything, and hey, if it wasn't obvious enough already, this is the exact same as your FPV remote controller. Not every controller is going to work with every gaming console, or in our case, drone system, so you do need to make sure that you're buying the right one for your drone. Okay, third, we've got the headset. These are what transport you directly into the game and truly makes for a full immersive experience. Different headsets offer different levels of immersion and simply won't work with all of the other gaming consoles. This is just like the FPV goggles that you wear over your face. Some are gonna rock and others are gonna suck at bringing that full immersive feeling to you, so choosing the right one is, well, kind of crucial. Our fourth essential part to the gaming console is the power cable. It ensures your gaming console has all the power it needs to run at full performance without fail. It's obviously pretty important to know the right cable for your console as, well, some are going to require more power, while some can only handle smaller amounts and won't actually run without the correct one. This is, of course, the same as LiPo batteries for your FPV drone. Bigger drones need bigger batteries. Smaller drones, well, they need smaller batteries. Then the last thing you'll need to get your console working is a power socket to plug right into. This is your charger for your LiPo batteries, as without one of these, you aren't going to be able to get flying very fast. So now that you know you'll be needing the drone itself, a controller, pair of goggles, batteries, and a charger for your drone bundle, we can get right on into the exciting part. Starting off with $100. Now, this is the only one that isn't going to give you the full experience. However, it's still perfect if you want to test the waters of FPV and really want to spend a small amount trying it out. For $100, you're going to get the Radio Master Pocket Radio Controller. So make sure it's the ELRS version along with 2 18650 batteries. Those batteries are going to go inside of the remote so that it can actually power up. Now that alone burns through 77% of our budget, meaning our remaining amount needs to go into a simulator. If you've got access to a computer of some sort, I'd recommend DRL as it's going to give you the easiest tutorial intro ever. However, if you haven't got a computer and instead only have access to an Android phone, you can go right ahead and download the Velocidrone for Mobile Simulator. This, by the way, is a mobile version of one of the most realistic simulators money can buy on a computer, so having it on mobile is actually really awesome. Moving on to the $200 budget. If you're umming and ahhing between spending $100 or $200, I would really urge you to go for the latter, the $200 one, as it's actually going to give you the real FPV experience that you're after. For $200, you're going to be able to grab the Beta FPV Cetus FPV kit along with an additional 8 BT 2.0 1S 300 mAh batteries. For some reason, these seem to be quite hard to come by right now, so if they're out of stock, grab yourself 5 of the Lava 1S 300 mAh batteries instead. This setup is going to have you ready to roll with a controller for simulator practice, and then when you're feeling confident enough, a drone and goggles setup to actually fly in real life with. Of course, those additional batteries need to be charged up, and that's where the included kit charger is going to come in handy. It's just a simple USB-C plug, so there isn't really much you need to learn about there. I really recommend that you do pick up extra batteries though, as the flight time is super short and you're going to find yourself wanting to keep on flying, so the batteries are going to help you do that. Alright, $300 and things are getting really exciting now. This is personally where I would start out if I had never touched FPV before and wanted to give things a proper shot without, a massive budget. This equipment will be able to grow with you, and the drone that I'm recommending for this budget is actually one of my favorite drones right now, which is saying a lot. So without further ado, here's what to get. The Radiomaster ELRS pocket radio with the two 18650 batteries, 4 Lava 1S 450 mAh batteries, and a Beta FPV 6-port 1S battery charger. Those so far are mostly all things that we've seen before in this video. However, now we're bringing in the Beta FPV VR03 FPV goggles and my favorite drone, the Meteor 75 Pro. It's important to make sure when you're buying both your controller and the drone that you actually select the ELRS versions. That way you're going to be able to bind them together and you're not going to be left stranded with a non-connecting remote. Okay, next up is the $400 budget. You're going to start to see some more similarities here, but these are multiple upgrades that are going to make your purchase even more future-proofed. We've got the Meteor 75 Pro, pocket radio, and radio batteries all being the exact same, but now we're increasing the number of batteries up to 8, grabbing an extra 6-port charger, and picking up 2 spare canopies, 2 spare frames, and 4 sets of 45mm props for the Meteor 75 Pro. If this is all starting to sound confusing and you're getting a little bit lost with all these names that I'm throwing out there, don't stress. I have put everything from this entire video into a downloadable list down in the description box below. You'll simply be able to reference that instead of needing to come back to this video, and I can also keep it updated if any of the options have some crazy change. And look, if you need another reason other than it's going to save you money, it's not going to cost you any either. It's completely free to download. Now, you might be wondering why I haven't mentioned the goggles yet too. And don't worry, I didn't forget about them. Instead, I upgraded them to what Joshua Bardwell states is his cheapest worth having FPV goggles, the Eachine EV800D. I personally have never tried these. However, I have heard from multiple people that they are great for their price, hence why I've chosen them here. Alright, so far you've got yourself a really solid tiny whoop setup that's going to be able to last you and grow with you for a long time. However, if tiny whoops aren't what excites you enough to try out the hobby, then I'm stoked to be able to introduce you to your first ever 5-inch freestyle or cinematic FPV setup for $500. We're running with the same pocket radio, the same Eachine goggles, and well, that's where the similarities stop. To kick off your 5-inch drone experience, I'm recommending the iFlight Nazgul XL5 Eco. It's a budget version of my first ever 5-inch drone, and had it been available when I was starting out, it totally would have been my first ever 5-inch drone instead. To power it, you'll be needing to grab 2 CNHL Speedy Pizza 1200 mAh 6S LiPo batteries. Oh my goodness, that's a mouthful, man. All these numbers, good lord. Now, you could go for 4S batteries, and honestly, there is nothing wrong with you if you do that. However, I'm going to push you towards 6S instead, as it's going to allow for more room for you to grow as a pilot and possibly give you more confidence in the drone's capabilities. To charge up, I'm also bringing in our first proper battery charger on today's list, the ISDT 608 AC. It's got the power supply built into it, so you're not going to be needing to rock around a massive power supply like I've got here. You may have noticed that the $500 budget didn't leave you with much flight time in the air, right? I mean, 2 batteries would definitely leave me wanting more time in the sky, hence why for the $600 budget, I'm only changing 2 things. The drone, remote, goggles, and charger are all staying the exact same. However, we're adding in an extra 4 CNHL Speedy Pizza 1200 mAh 6S batteries. Still a mouthful, I need to shorten that down. Anyways, taking our total up to 6 batteries, which is great, but it does leave us with a problem. our charger only has room for one battery to be charged up at a time, which means charging 6 batteries up is going to be tedious, and honestly this is going to take way longer than we would want. That's why, to wrap up this bundle, I'm also adding in a parallel balanced charging board, which is going to let you charge up all 6 of your batteries at once. Please make sure that you do some research before just plugging in all your batteries at once, as you do need to learn what is actually healthy for the batteries and what is not, but more on how to do that just a little bit later on in the video. Okay, $700. The upgrades are starting to get really serious now, but that also means we're not able to change as much volume as we are quality. Everything remains the exact same as before with the goggles, drone, battery, charger, and balance board. Where the upgrade comes in now, however, is with our controller. We're going from a pretty good little controller to an absolute beast that honestly may never need to be upgraded like ever again for you. This controller is the Radio Master Boxer, the ELRS version, with a 2S 6200 mAh battery to power it up. Provided that you get the ELRS version of the Nazgul XL5 still, you're not going to be needing anything else extra to connect it up. For the $800 budget, we're getting ourselves set up with a really solid setup that's going to help you stay in the sky for longer at any one given time. The drone, goggles, and controller stay the same, but we add an extra battery to the mix and an extra parallel charging board. But Brody, what the heck am I supposed to do with an extra parallel charging board when I've only got one port on my charger? Well, I'm so glad that you asked, because that's where the exciting upgrade comes in for this budget. The charger. I'm recommending that you pick up the Hota D6 Pro charger, which is not only really well renowned in the FPV space, but it also introduces an extra port, doubling your charging output. Remember, if this battery stuff is confusing, just bear with it for now. It'll all make sense at the end of the video. Alrighty, $900. Everything stays the exact same again. However, this time we swap out the previous 7 CNHL 1200 batteries for 8 GNB lithium high volt 1300 6S batteries. Not only are you getting an extra battery to fly with, but you're also getting a much higher performance battery that is lighter, smaller, and holds more capacity. These are the exact batteries that I now actually race with, and honestly, they have lasted a lot longer than any of my CNHL batteries in terms of longevity and durability. If replacing batteries more often though doesn't matter to you, then this budget range really doesn't offer you much, but if you're like me and you want your purchase to last, this is a huge upgrade. Okay, now for the 4th time in today's video, we'll be getting a really solid upgrade to the goggles in our $1,000 budget. Unfortunately, for this upgrade to happen, we've had to shift some things around with our batteries again. Now, we're going back to the CNHL Speedy Pizza 1200s, but we've got 8 of them, and we're dropping one of our parallel balanced charging boards. But honestly, it's all totally worth it for the goggles experience. This allows us to go from the Airsheen box goggles, which are good, to what is commonly known as the best pair of box goggles money can buy, the SkyZone Cobra X V4s. These are yet again another pair of goggles that I personally have not used. However, they've been recommended left, right, and center and stand strong on Joshua Bardwell's recommendation page as well. Alright, this is personally my favorite and most exciting part in the video so far. For $1,100, you've got the choice to either go all in on analog or switch over to the dark side and go properly HD. Now that I've said that, I should probably mention that HD really isn't the dark side, and it's probably one of the best choices I ever made, but hey, the choice is totally up to you. Our $1,100 analog setup consists of the Boxer radio, Hota charger, and parallel balanced charge board, Nazgul Eco, 7 CNHL batteries, and our fancy new goggles, the SkyZone Sky 04L V2s. These are going to move you away from that big, slightly uncomfortable box style of goggle and shift you into the binocular style instead. They've got a really solid analog receiver built into them, so you'll be stepping up your video signal quality and range as well. To top it all off though, you'll be wanting to add on some antennas to the goggles, which for this I've recommended the Foxair Lollipop 10cm V4s and the Menace RC Pico Patch. Combining both of these antennas is going to give you the best reception for most flying. That now does move us away from analog for the rest of the video, so with the exact same budget of $1,100, let's see what you could get going into a shiny new HD setup. Pretty much everything changes except for the Boxer radio here, so let's go through the rest of the buying list. Our goggles are going to be the DJI Integras, which are some of the best quality and best price for what you get, in my opinion. The drone is similar to what we have in the analog version. However, instead of an analog video version, we're now swapping them out for DJI's O3 system, which is like 100 times better looking than any analog feed ever. To be able to have one of the best controllers, goggles, and video systems in a drone though, we've had to make some compromises on the batteries and charger. Instead of the nice Hoda charger, we're going back to the ISDT 608 AC charger with one parallel balance charging board, and we're also cutting back the batteries to 4 CNHL Speedy Peach the 1200s. Personally, I do think the compromise is actually worth it, as the charger and batteries are some of the more cheaper parts that you can actually upgrade later on down the road. Now, however, that does open us up to some really solid quality of life improvements as we go for the $1,200 budget. We pop another CNHL battery back in, swap out to the nice Hota D6 charger, and throw in 2 spare sets of Delprop Nepal N2 propellers. Trust me, you're gonna be thankful that you bought some extra of these things when you start crashing properly, because you're gonna bend and break them really fast. The $1,300 budget is similar again and brings us some more quality of life improvements. We up the batteries to 8 CNHL 1200s, 2 parallel charging boards, and 10 sets of Delprop Nepal N2 propellers, giving you more flight time, fast charges, and ideally more flights in the long run as you get to swap those propellers out. The last quality of life improvement comes in the $1,400 budget range, where we simply swap out all of our CNHL batteries for 8 G&B lithium high volt 1300s. I've already run through why these are the more premium option, but seriously, you're gonna notice the difference. And that brings me to the last budget range for this video. But instead of settling for $1,500, I instead built out exactly what I would purchase if I just had an unlimited budget and wanted to get started in FPV with the best of the best, zero compromises. Surprisingly, this unlimited budget thing actually only stretched out to $1,800, and truthfully, I can't think of wanting anything else aside from this, so without further ado, this is my recommendation for anyone wanting top tier everything. We start off with the Radio Master Boxer controller, which is indeed not the most expensive controller around. However, is premiumitize a word? I don't know. Anyways, it is now. To make it more premium, I've added on the AG01 gimbals, which are CNC'd metal gimbals instead of the stock plastic ones. It's a bit unnecessary in all honesty, but hey, we wanted the best, right? Next is the goggles. For these, I'm actually still running with the Goggles Integra. You might be wondering why I didn't pick the newer Goggles 3 or even the more expensive Goggles 2, and my reasoning behind that is simply because they offer more compatibility over the Goggles 3, and they're more comfortable than the Goggles 2. I'd still be running the Hota D6 charger with 2 balance boards and 8 GMB 1300 mAh batteries, so not much more to report there. However, the last upgrade is where most of the budget increase went into, the drone. Instead of going for the Nazgul HD Eco, I would swap it out for the iFlight Nazgul Evoke F6 V2 HD O3. Holy crap, just another mouthful of a name there. This version of the Nazgul has slightly bigger props, much higher quality electronics, and some awesome looking LED panels on it. It's pretty much the blinged out version of the Eco, and it's not gonna offer like some massive flight performance upgrade, but it is for sure gonna be a more premium feel, and hey, that's what I'd be after.
Now, I totally get the fact that you might be feeling a little overwhelmed at this stage, but honestly, it is time to congratulate yourself. You've already learned what the bare basics are to get started, what you need to be doing to practice, and exactly what gear you need to buy to get you ready to fly. Just those 3 modules took me months to figure out when I was starting, so seriously, that's a high five for you, my friend. Great job. You've just smashed months worth of knowledge into your brain in like a little over an hour. That is just crazy to say. All of this summed up though means you're now past the initial learning barrier of the technical stuff, which means now it is time to double down and get right on to learning the nitty-gritty of actually flying in real life. This next module is going to show you what happens when you try to go from knowing nothing to flying a 5-inch FPV drone in 24 hours, what type of flying you should be practicing, and the exact way that I would start out if I were to do it all again. This is Tyron. He's a complete noob in FPV and has honestly never flown a drone in his entire life, so here, give it a shot, man. Let's see what you got. Right, so here's the deal. In this video, I'll be trying my absolute best to take Tyron from his current noob level all the way up to flying a proper 5-inch freestyle drone with full control. But because I want it to really be a challenge, I've decided that we only have 24 hours to do it. and that time starts now. To make as much use of the 24 hours as possible, I came up with 3 stages of training. Stage 1 is where Tyron is going to be properly introduced to the FPV drone world through the DRL simulator. So this is the exact simulator that I use to get started, so kind of just utilizing the fact that I've done it before, so surely Tyron can do it too. The thing that's going good for me here is that Tyron is actually a gamer. He's like super good at Minecraft.
Bro, this guy's chatting such waffle, man. I play like Fortnite sometimes. This guy calls me a gamer.
Oh my god, dude, where have you been? It's been like 3 days.
Mate, not now. My mom just airdropped me OG Fortnite from across the country.
Is that a PlayStation and a TV?
All right, boys. Where we're dropping.
Point being is that he knows how to use a controller and will have some thought of hand to brain coordination, so you can understand what you're doing with some sticks. So that's what's going for me. Other than that, I actually have no idea.
I've never flown anything in my life.
That's crazy, dude. What's even crazier though is the fact that by the end of this video, Tyron would have flown in real life not just once,
Oh no, I've lost.
but actually multiple times, and you, hopefully, would have pressed that subscribe button. Hopefully. Anyway, I took Tyron into the super basics of flying with the onboarding training. This again is exactly how I learned, so I knew that I could actually trust the process. It took him through the ropes of learning to fly in angle mode, which I'll admit is a bit of a controversial one, but I wanted to do this to make sure that there wasn't too much of a knock to his initial confidence, which almost certainly would have happened if he had gone full acro straight away. So it's been genuinely amazing to me. In the past, literally just over an hour, I've watched Tyron go from having no clue at all about what to do with the sticks to now understanding how to maneuver around and pop balloons. And he's actually extremely passionate about redoing courses.
I want to be the best.
And you know what? There's really nothing wrong with that either. The only slight issue for Tyron here was that I had just switched him out of the easy to fly angle mode, which came as a bit of a surprise to him.
I don't even know what I'm doing. What? Wait, what?
After just over an hour, we were moving on to now being in acro trainer mode, which put simply is like an angle restricted acro mode that takes the springiness away and replaces it with some true acro controls with a little bit of angle limiting. Unfortunately, for the both of us, this mode was proving to not work very well in Tyron's brain, which started leading us into some, let's just call them interesting moments.
No! My legs are quivering. Oh shit, that's some X Games shit. We both look at it like there's no way he's actually made it this far.
Bro is genuinely not comprehending life right now and is going a little insane. Which is fine though, because genuinely, when I first started, I was smacking the desk with frustration. It's safe to say that the initial explosion of learning this new skill without any proper breaks for something like 2.5 hours might not have been the best idea, so it was at this point in time that I decided it would be a good idea to take a break for a couple of hours and just let the spaghetti brain sort itself out for a while. And you know what? I'm really damn glad that we did, because as soon as we came back, Tyron immediately picked it up and was able to fly so much better than when he had last tried. So with this newfound confidence, once again, I decided that it would be a good time to surprise him with the introduction of Stage 2. Stage 2 is where Tyron will be taking this little tiny whoop and trying to fly in real life for the first time ever. There was one big variable that I hadn't considered beforehand, however, and it wasn't looking to be in Tyron's favor. So, Tyron has now had approximately, would you say 3 hours on the simulator total? Like of actual simulator flying?
Yes.
Okay, 3 hours.
And my brain doesn't fucking work anymore.
So yeah, Tyron's a little brain dead.
I actually need to go to rehab because of him.
He's got a bit of spaghetti brain from learning how to fly FPV. Fair enough. It's extremely windy out here right now. It's very hard to tell because there's nothing to really fly around, but, well, there's a drone.
Yeah, just look at the state of this tennis court. It's very windy.
The point is, it's not even suitable for this tiny whoop, the little Meteor 75 Pro, to fly in, let alone have a beginner fly it. So,
First time flying.
First time
First
ever
time
flying anything.
And it's the worst conditions possible.
Yeah. Now, when we say that this is Tyron's first ever flight, I mean that in every sense possible. He literally had not even looked through a pair of goggles before, which meant that I, of course, had to give him the classic first time run around flight to show him what was coming up in store for him. Yeah, this is what it's gonna feel like in a second, dude.
Whoa, this is trippy.
This is officially
Oh my
the first flight ever by Tyron Freeman. So, you're gonna go
Yes.
really, really slowly, okay?
I will try.
Nice. And go to the right. Look at you go, dude!
Oh no, I've lost. Wait, we're turning back in.
Oh my god, no, my drone! Bring it back to us, boy! You got it, Tyron! You got it, I see it up there! Oh my god, that's so low to the... Yes, Tyron, what a save! What an absolute save! You're a gem! It's safe to say that for 3.5 hours of practice, this first flight was equal parts terrifying as it was hilarious. To actually see Tyron flying a drone with FPV goggles on was such a proud teacher moment, even if the flying was somewhat questionable at times. Holy shit! Oh my god! Bring it back to us, please! Bring it back to us! Tyron, this way. Towards us. Towards us, car. Oh my god! Oh my god, Tyron! You got this, dude. You got it, actually. You're fine.
You're just saying that.
Bring it back to us. Regardless, after about 4 flights, it was all looking a whole lot more promising than I had originally thought it might. Congratulations, Tyron. That was your first official FPV flight, and actually, you fucking nailed it. That does leave us, however, till tomorrow, which tomorrow is after sleep tomorrow. Still within our 24 hours, however. We are 8 hours down, and with probably another 10 hours of sleep and getting dinner and whatnot, it's gonna take us to 18.5 hours, giving us 3.5 hours left.
Get this guy some help. Guys, let me just help you out. It's gonna give us 6 hours to complete the challenge.
And in those 6 hours, we're gonna be taking Tyron from acro trainer mode and angle mode and tiny whoop to 5-inch freestyle full acro mode, and he's gonna do a backflip tomorrow. Good morning. We are now 20 hours into the challenge, and we've done absolutely no more practice since we last practiced with the tiny whoop outside last night.
Yeah.
Tyron woke up about half an hour ago, so I feel kind of bad, but
I'm refreshed.
are you ready to hop on the simulator?
No.
What we're going to do is we're going to go from acro trainer mode, which is what he's been doing on the simulator. I'm going to put him into full acro mode now. We're going to practice full acro mode, and then we're going out to the field and we're going to take out the trusty Nazgul, the 5-inch freestyle drone, for Tyron's first proper FPV drone flight. The tiny whoop doesn't really count, but it does, but it doesn't. So, simulator for probably about half an hour until we really get the hang of it. Then we're going to head out. There's no wind. Should be a good day. And so just like that, we cracked right on into full acro mode. This was a major leap for Tyron, even going from the acro trainer mode, as he now had full control of the drone and had to correct any wrong movements that he might make on his own. Considering that he'd only been training for like a maximum of 4 hours prior to this morning, my confidence was spiking, and I was feeling genuinely ready to hand over the controls of my 5-inch Nazgul Evoke. There was just one thing that Tyron wanted to do beforehand. Let's go fly.
Yay!
Let's go fly.
Let's go fly.
Like we're actually gonna go fly.
Let's go fly.
Oh no.
I'm deleting this fucking simulator right now. Gone. Get out of my life.
This is Tyron's first official flight of a 5-inch freestyle FPV drone. He's flying in full acro mode. We're not starting off in anything else. Yeah. And I'm gonna run you through real quick too. If at some point you feel like you're losing control,
Yeah.
oh, disarm. Before plummeting into the ground, oh no. I'm gonna flick that switch like that. That's gonna put you into that stabilized mode, okay? So with our fail-proof safety system in place, it was now time to see how much 30 minutes of full acro mode training could teach someone.
3, 2, 1.
Nice. Oh, disarm. Oh, don't disarm. Oh no. Where's it gone? Into the river? Have you got signal?
No.
You ever got signal?
I saw it lost by a rock.
Just like that, I reached the conclusion that maybe starting nearby to a river wasn't the best idea. We had no idea if it landed in the water, or next to it, or wherever. We didn't even know where it was. So all I could hope for is that we were actually able to find it.
So right now we have no signal. Maybe the battery ejected, I'm not too sure. Either that or it landed straight in the water. Oh my God. Oh no. You crashed your first drone, well done. I'm gonna get out of this river now. So we are one drone down, one battery down.
In the space of 20 seconds. It was
I think
here.
you had a little bit more than 20
It was
seconds.
here. 20 seconds later, it was in the fucking river.
It's okay, I put the blame on me. I fucking panicked and told you to disarm. On to the next.
Yeah.
Except what we're gonna do is we're just gonna have you fly it in angle mode.
Yes.
Which is the easy mode.
Realistically, we should have built up to it, I think.
Yeah, but it's more cinematic.
Yeah.
Just boost it.
Don't just go in and do
Get it for
it.
the story, man. Honestly, you did well.
I mean, yeah.
Second attempt and second drone. Let's go for it.
All right, baby.
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay. Just trying to go absolutely minutely slow. Oh, I just went black.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, my analog converted DJI goggles V2 are just blacked out. And no, it's not from a lack of battery, it's just simply a software bug that I can't seem to fix. But that would now mean that we had lost access to both drones, the first being drowned in a river, and the second having no goggles to connect to. Now imagine what would happen if Tyron had practiced for 2 weeks solid before trying to fly for the first time. If you ask me, I reckon that he probably would have had heaps more control and been able to fly way more confidently. So look, give yourself some space and give yourself some time, learn more than you think that you need to learn in the simulator, and then I think you'll find that you'll be ready for that first flight. But look, even if you go ahead and have a flight or two, you're going to very quickly wonder what the heck to do while flying. You see, there are these sub-niches within FPV, and some people love them all, while others prefer to stick with one or maybe two. One of these niches is, in my opinion, 100% superior to all of the others for beginners, and it's actually going to give you a bit of an unfair advantage. So this next video is going to show you what those options are, the pros and cons behind each of them, and which one is best for you to pursue. This is freestyle, this is long range, this is racing, and this is cinematic, but which one is the best niche for you to start your FPV journey in? I started within the cinematic niche, meaning my motives were based solely around getting some dope video shots and nothing more. Although this did work for me eventually and got me where I am today within the space, I don't actually think it's the best place to start and wouldn't recommend it for a beginner. To get you going, let's run you through each of the main niches within FPV drones, what the benefits and drawbacks of them all are, and then which one I think is best for you. To kick us off, let's start with cinematic flying. Now, cinematic flying is exactly what it sounds like. You fly with the intent of filming some really cool video footage like capturing the scenery or chasing a drift car around a track. Generally, there isn't too much flipping around and performing difficult maneuvers, however, throttle control is really important to keep your drone low and close to the ground. It's actually a lot easier than you might think to get those swooping cinematic shots or even a smooth dive off a cliff. Furthermore, it's quite a limitless skill to learn, as you can start off getting the easy shots and then move on to the tighter, closer and riskier shots later down the track. Another benefit of flying with the intent of filming is that as soon as you get home, run your footage through a stabilization software, you then get to watch back over it and get all giddy and excited. I can't even remember the amount of times I used to do this where I'd shoot a bunch of shots and then just be absolutely amped to see them on the computer screen as soon as the shoot was over. Honestly, it gets even more exciting when you can start showing your family and friends the footage and then furthermore post it to your socials as well. It does have its drawbacks, however, with the biggest one nearly causing me to leave the hobby altogether. That big drawback is lack of community and flying with others. More often than not, you go out to film on an early sunrise or out on the mountains away from civilization. The solo experience can be a soothing time, but mentally I found that it took its toll on me and eventually nearly made me put down the controller indefinitely. The other main drawback for me is the cost of adding the GoPro to your quad. It's not a necessity that you need a GoPro specifically, but for me, it's the best looking footage and it's really the only way that I'd want to go before heading into the cine lifters with professional cameras. A one-off cost would be doable, however, unfortunately, when I was getting started, I went through 4 GoPros by crashing my drones. I still crash, by the way, but that's all part of the fun. The second niche, which is a similar vibe to cinematic flying, is long range. It's here that you get to fly through vast landscapes and fill in those explorer needs. This is the sort of flying that some will class as the same as cinematic, but I really believe the feeling of gliding down a mountain or even just getting up close and personal with the top of a waterfall is really just something so unique to this niche. A massive positive for these drones is if you fly something like a 3-inch Explorer and run lithium-ion batteries, your flight time is ridiculously long. I'm talking sometimes sitting around 20 to 25 minutes. That means more time for you behind the goggles and less money shelling out on 10 extra battery packs. Unfortunately, with all this in mind, long-range flying is actually severely illegal in some countries due to their line of sight laws. That means for a lot of people, it's not actually a possibility to take part in this niche aspect of the hobby. It also means the community surrounding it is either non-existent or people keep it on the down low for obvious reasons. It's always a good idea to make sure you're operating within your country's drone laws, so giving long range a miss might be the best for some people here. Alright, up next is racing. This is a completely different vibe from anything cinematic or slow. In fact, it's quite literally the exact opposite. Racing is either against yourself or other people, consists of flying through gates and around flags, and doing those tight turns as fast as you possibly can. This is seriously one of the most fun and sustainable niches within FPV, as you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people. That generally means from the get-go of meeting someone new, you always have something in common to talk about and can actually become friends really quickly. It's also a really competitive way of flying, whether you're just trying to do your best to beat your own time or whether you're actually racing against other pilots on the same track. Not only is flying in such a different way as a new skill to learn, but so is learning the ins and outs of building and fixing your quad as you crash and break things. It can be quite the challenge sometimes, but thankfully again, the community is seriously always there to help you out, even if it's just a simple mistake. There is literally little to no judgment and everyone is always excited to help you learn. Everything does of course have its cons, although I'd say these are able to be countered with how positive the community side of things is. Obviously, you're going fast and you're flying close to things, so your risk of hitting stuff at high speeds is very high, and you're more than likely going to break your quad. That means it can suck up your time, money, and especially your patience when things don't go to plan or they don't work like you think they should, so be aware if you have a low patience threshold like me. Talking about the building side of things, it can be a bit limiting building a race-specific quad, as for a lot of races you aren't able to use a DJI video system. I'm sure that there are many reasons behind it, but I know for the fact that the biggest one is the interference that it causes for every other system out there. I personally experience it when flying with my friends, and even that still with all of the precautions possible taken. Now, the final drawback for racing, which is funnily enough one of the reasons I never wanted to start, is the steep learning curve in all aspects. Both the building of the quad and the flying process can and will take a while to get your head around, and you'll need to learn a lot, but I personally think at the end of the day, the satisfaction of knowing you've built something that flies is pretty damn awesome. The final main style of flying that we're covering today is called freestyle. This is the type of flying that I'd class as more just for fun, but don't get me wrong here, there is still a lot to learn within it and a lot of skill required to be good. If cruising after work and going for a fun flight sounds more like you, then freestyle is probably a really good route to try out. You get the fast experience of flying close to things, but also the smooth feeling of performing tricks, dives, and flips. It's still a viable option to film and then share with too, as once you get smooth and hitting close call gaps, it can be really epic footage that is actually worth showing to others. Thankfully, freestyle has been around for quite a while too, and alongside racing is what I'd say the most common niche. That means you get the benefit of having other pilots around you who you can most likely meet up with and fly together with. If you aren't able to find anyone else though, it can have the exact same effect as cinematic flying had for me getting started, where the loneliness takes its toll. Similar to racing here, once you start to push your limits, you're most likely going to start breaking parts as well, which means there is the same learning barrier and money aspect to this too. This is still a solid option to start out with and is actually the way that a lot of pilots fly, as there is plenty to learn. It offers the same skill sets as racing and can still have a community based around it. So now that you know what each of the main niches are within FPV, you're completely free to decide where you think you should start out. But if I can give you my biggest piece of advice, it's to start where the community is. For the majority of people, that's going to mean starting out with racing. It's, in my opinion, the best way to see yourself progress. It's the easiest place to ask every question you ever have, and it's really a whole different flying experience with other people, even if they're miles better. Trust me, I would know. The other alternative here is if you find that you know of a few freestyle or cinematic pilots in your area, I'm going to seriously recommend that you try to connect with them and go out to fly with them. Sometimes it can be hard to find others, and that's exactly what I struggled with just over a year ago. However, the moment I tried the racing scene is the moment everything changed for me.
So how the heck do you even get into the racing scene then? Well, the great news here is that by being involved in it for a little while now, I've put together a super simple system for you to follow to get started with racing. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to get involved in an FPV racing club, you'll have new buddies left, right and center, and you'll even have a massive new goal to strive towards, which is perhaps the most important part of it all. So many people start out racing FPV drones completely wrong, waste tons of money, and end up learning everything the hard way. So in this video, I'm going to show you my simple 5-step solution to get anyone started, exactly what gear to buy, and the powerful method I've used time and time again to find awesome friends that just simply boost my flying skills. Okay, so to understand how my 5-step solution works, I first need to tell you about the method that will absolutely change your entire FPV experience. How do I know, you might be wondering? Well, because it absolutely transformed mine. About a year and a half ago, I was pretty much completely alone in the hobby. I had no friends who were interested in drones, knew pretty much no one online, and had no idea if there was even anyone else in New Zealand who actually flew. Completely by chance though, I had a friend, who knew I loved FPV drones, tagged me in a Facebook event for a national FPV drone race. Pretty soon after that, I'd made the decision to attend the event with no intention of racing. This would seriously be the first time I'd ever seen more than one FPV drone flying at any one time, so to say I was stupidly excited would probably be an understatement. Anyways, skip forward a month, I'd gone along to the event and had a great time, but it was only when I was on my 5-hour drive back home that I started wondering what the heck I was going to do now that I'd left all of my friends behind. I was going back to solo flying with absolutely no idea where to look for local pilots, but that is when I decided to jump on Facebook yet again. And no, not while driving, just when I got home. I headed onto the New Zealand FPV drone group, which honestly was nothing too special, and I was super doubtful I would actually find anyone on there that was nearby to me. But somehow, by the absolute luck of God and, well, a lot of scrolling, there was a post from 5 weeks prior that I found. It read something along the lines of, "Are there any other pilots around the Wanaka area who would be keen on meeting up to have a fly?" At this stage, I was seriously dumbfounded that there was actually someone else around me, let alone someone else who wanted to meet up and fly. Long story short though, the people who wrote that post are now my super good friends Julius and Sam, and yeah, we fly together pretty often still. Through this experience, I've now stumbled across what might be the easiest and most effective method to actually find new people near to you with the same interests. By following this method, you'll set yourself up to ensure that the feeling of loneliness doesn't hit you as hard as it did for me, and that you level up your skills a whole lot faster while having a truckload more fun. Think of finding new like-minded friends and becoming involved in a community similar to that of joining a running club. While running alone will certainly keep you fit, you may find it difficult to actually push yourself and learn new things. Flip that on its head though and start running with a bunch of others in a club, and you'll find that you get pacing buddies, learn new routes, and even provide a bit of friendly competition. Similarly, flying solo with your drone can be comfortable but unchallenging, while flying with others brings you new courses, strategies, and, well, certainly friendly competition as well. It simply brings out the best in everyone through structured races and tons of communal support. Alrighty, so at this point you might be thinking, what the heck do you need to do for this to work for you? Well, there are 2 sites that you'll need to be a part of. The first being good old Facebook. Simply join up to as many FPV drone groups nearby to you, or if you live in a smaller country like I do, join any national groups that might exist too. Once you're in the groups, have a browse around and see if anyone else has put out a call to see if there are others nearby to them. If there are, it doesn't matter how old the post is, just fire a comment or a DM through and just see where it takes you. If there are no posts though, put one out for yourself, as you just never know who's looking. The second site to be a part of requires a tad more effort, but will make finding friends even more of a breeze. You'll need to have a Discord account set up, and then you'll need to start having a look at online FPV stores and see if any of them have a Discord group linked. If they do, I'm sure you know the drill. Join them, fire a message to the general chat room, and see who's nearby to you. If you're struggling with any Discord groups, go to your favorite creators here on YouTube and just see what they have available.
The unfortunate reality is that you might not be as lucky as I was in terms of finding IRL friends immediately, but at the very least, you can always jump on video calls and fly with them in simulators. This is actually still one of the most common ways that I keep in touch with all the guys who I met at that drone racing event, as otherwise they're a 5-hour drive away. Okay, so this leads us on to something that I like to call the up system. There's 5 steps that stack on top of each other that I'm certain can take anybody from knowing literally nothing about FPV to signing up to their first ever drone racing event. Now, it is crucial that you follow each of these steps in order and don't skip any of them, otherwise I can't guarantee that everything will work out so easily for you. But with that being said, let's start off at the beginning with step 1. This is the first building block that we'll be stacking all of the other steps on top of, so it's really important that you take your time here and probably don't follow in my footsteps back when I was getting started. Initially, I had no clue what I was doing. I bought myself the cheapest FPV drone kit around and tried to fly without doing any sort of research beforehand. I guess realistically, the fact that you're watching this video, hopefully before buying a whole bunch of gear, means that you've already one-upped me, so good on you. Anyways, the point of step 1 is to do your research into what gear you need and whether you want to build or buy. That means figuring out the video system that is best for you, the controller that suits you best, and of course, the drone or parts for your build. But I totally get it, this is starting to feel like the most overwhelming part. It's literally the reason I never did my research before starting out and inevitably ended up buying the wrong things. So, to combat this overwhelm for you, I've put together 2 totally different budget options of gear that will take every choice out of things and just set you up for success a little bit later on in the video. Before that though, I want to show you the rest of the system. Step 2, I call Startup. This is again another place where I really fell short when starting out. Instead of spending time, I chose to spend money and pretty much went straight to flying in real life. That meant I broke more things on my drone from crashing, ruined countless batteries, and really found that I had limited my skills by skipping this step. For you, however, this is the step where you jump on a simulator with your shiny new controller and just practice the heck out of flying. It can seem draining and intense, and well, that's because it actually is a little bit. But give yourself some grace and some time, and just remember that you're learning something completely new, so it can only really get easier going forward. I initially started flying after about 4 hours on the simulator, which wasn't so bad for a bit of fun, but I then chose to neglect the simulator going forward for a long time, and well, that's one of the things that I would change if I could go back in time. Alrighty, on to step 3. Level up. Now, if you're still following this 5-step system, you'll know by now that you enjoy the challenge of drone racing in general, which is exactly why it's super important to make sure you've actioned what we talked about earlier. If you haven't by this stage found someone else to fly with in real life, this is when you need to find a group of others to fly around with. There's really no excuse to not be able to find a group of like-minded people either, not at least when we have the power of the internet. I mean, heck, there are hundreds of thousands of FPV drone nerds around the world, so I know for a fact that you can find a few somewhere. Now, once you've got your group, either in real life or virtually, it doesn't matter, it's time to implement step 4. This is the only step that I actually nailed first time while getting started, and it's also the step that I think progressed me forward so much faster than I could possibly have gone on my own. What I'm talking about here is going to race events, spectating, chatting, and learning everything that others are willing to teach you. From here, you're able to really start to wrap your head around how racing works, the adrenaline highs and lows, and the types of moves you should be trying your best to train up with. For me, this all started when I went to that initial drone racing event. It was there that I learned just how amazing the community is, what drone racing is all about, and, well, what I was going to try out next. Obviously, you aren't going to learn everything all at once, but you'll certainly pick up on fundamentals that you otherwise wouldn't have just by being around people that are more skilled than you. Think of it like if you were to spend an entire day in a room full of super good dragon trainers. Yeah, we're talking dragon trainers here. Regardless of whether you're actually trying to learn how to train a dragon or not, you'll end up picking up on some tips or tricks that you just never would have known by hearing their dragon training stories. And yeah, I have no idea why I chose to talk about dragon training, but hey, you're welcome. That now leaves us with one final step before we get to my recommendations on exactly what gear you should be buying. And to be honest, this final step is actually the simplest of them all, yet it might also be the most nerve-wracking one to actually pull off. All you have to do to complete the system and go from knowing little to nothing to going all the way to that first race is to actually sign up. You got to get that first official race booked in for yourself, even if it's not some massive national drone race and instead is a small tournament that you organize with your friends. But just make it official for yourself. Don't worry about getting first place and just set yourself the goal of being a part of it all. To really seal the deal for you, I've put together a full digital cheat sheet with tick off as you go milestones that you can download totally for free. I've got that as the first link in the description, so head on down and grab that one. Alright, now that you've got the simple up system nestled into your tool belt, it's time to put it all into action by, well, starting step 1, gear up. Think of your drone gear choices like a pair of shoes. Every sock, shoe, and grip is designed for specific activities like trail running or fancy dress-ups, and every shoe has got a different fit for different people. It's pretty much the same as your drone, goggles, and controller. There are so many different options for different use cases like filming or racing, and some people just don't fit specific gear comfortably. In the past, I've found that it can be pretty tough figuring out what is best for racing specifically too, especially when you don't know what to look for. A bad drone purchase can pretty easily end up being the equivalent of wearing a pair of dress shoes when you want to go out on a run. So to make things as easy as possible for you, I've put together one budget-friendly option to get you ready to race and one all-out option for those of you who just want the best of the best, no exceptions. Starting off with controllers. A solid budget-friendly controller that comes with ELRS built into it is the Radio Master Pocket Radio. ELRS is going to continue becoming more of the golden standard in FPV, and it's widely used for racing thanks to its low latency, so it's just best to go with that over anything else right now. On the other end of the spectrum though, the premium option that I'd go with right now is the Radio Master Boxer with AGO1 gimbals. Honestly, it is one of the nicest, most solid controllers I have ever flown with, and I would pick it up in a heartbeat over my more expensive TX16S. Anyways, moving on to the goggles, this is by far one of the most important pieces of equipment to get right, as it's going to actually determine whether you're allowed to fly at races or not. What I'm talking about here is goggles that run two-way HD video systems often aren't actually allowed at races due to the large amount of interference that they cause other pilots. That means the big systems like DJI and Walksnail are both off the charts and instead leaves us with Analog, HD0, and Sharkbite. For the budget option, analog is going to be the best way to go. You'll suffer from a bit of a worse looking image, but this is still how a lot of racers like to fly, as it's what they're most used to. For this, I'm recommending the Beta FPV VR03 goggles, as they are some of the cheaper but more recent goggles around for analog. I do want to say I don't personally own them, nor have I actually tested them out. However, I've used plenty of box goggles in the past and they're all pretty damn similar. Then for the premium choice, it's HD0 all the way, baby. This is quickly becoming the absolute top tier standard for racing and it just looks great. So if you can afford it, I couldn't recommend it more. That then leaves us with the most exciting choice to make, and it's also one of the hardest ones to recommend anything for. Most racers will agree that you should build your own race drone so you know how to fix it when you inevitably break it, and while I do agree with that, I'm also of the opinion that if building a drone looks too daunting to you right away, or you simply just don't want to, don't build one. There are plenty of solid pre-built drones out now, so for these options I'm only going to recommend pre-builds as they're the most straightforward way to get started. The budget option here is to go with the Meteor 75 Pro. Just make sure it's the analog one and not the HD0 one, otherwise you're going to have to get the HD0 system, which is more expensive. It's certainly no 5-inch full-spec racer, but it will absolutely allow you to race around and get the hang of flying in tight spaces from the comfort of your own backyard. But then, if you think you're ready for a full-spec premium race drone, I'd point you straight towards the 533 website where you can get a ready-to-fly 533 Light Switch V2 with HD0 installed into it. I've left all of those links down in the description below so you can find what suits you best alongside that cheat sheet from before. Woohoo! Heck yeah! You are now booked in and involved in the community for real now, so congratulations and welcome. By this stage, you're probably feeling pretty damn confident and ready to tackle this hobby head first. And you know what? Good on ya. But if I can just offer one piece of advice to you right now, it's to not think you know more than you actually know. I've fallen into the trap of believing that I knew everything that there is to know about FPV before, and well, yeah, it humbled me stupidly quickly. So this next module is full of every mistake I've made, terrible purchases that I've wasted money on, and well, things that I've neglected that seriously could have affected my entire life very negatively. Not joking with that. The first video in this module will take us back in time to try giving my book of FPV advice to younger Brody. And along the way, I'll be teaching you everything I've learned from 1,000 hours of flying FPV drones. Right now, I am sitting on a time machine, and yes, I'm sure you expected a time machine to look a little bit more something like this. But no, to my surprise as well, it is literally just a chair. Anyways, this time machine is taking me back 1,461 days so that I can give beginner Brody, that's me by the way, this booklet here of everything that I've learned about the FPV drone hobby since starting out. Inside this booklet, I've specifically written down 40 pieces of FPV advice that I wish I'd known earlier, you know, things that would have actually helped me save my money, spend less time on the unimportant things, and well, just get the most enjoyment out of my 4 years in the hobby. In today's video though, I'm gonna make a few stops back along the way and share everything inside of this booklet with you as well. So, let's begin, shall we? Good lord, alright, geez. I guess that was a little bit of a rough start. Anyways, first up is something that I still struggle to actually do to this day, and I don't know why, because it's potentially one of the most beneficial things ever. Honestly, it's damn simple, one of the cheapest things to do in the hobby, and it makes you fly better. So what the heck is this first piece of advice? Well, it's don't skip the simulator. For me, I honestly struggle to find the time, as I would prefer to be out in reality flying. However, it also means that my skills don't really progress, as I'm always scared of breaking something if I try, say, my first trippy spin with my $500 drone. I would be so much better off nailing the fundamentals in a simulator and then translating those same stick movements later on into the real deal. Okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm really talking to myself here. The second piece of advice is that more drones really doesn't mean more fun or even opportunities. I'm now thankful to be in the rare position where companies will actually send me their products for free, which does mean that I end up with drones that I never actually asked for. But I do remember dreaming of this day and just thinking about how much better life would be if it could just happen to me. I'd be able to go fly more, have more fun, get jobs because of the gear. But yeah, no. As someone who is now in this position, I'm here to report that this is not at all the case. Don't get me wrong, I'm really grateful for it all, but it's not the golden goal that you should be striving towards. This third thing is one of those hurdles that are really hard to jump over at first, but it does get slightly easier as you actually get older. I know starting out, I personally wanted the absolute cheapest route into FPV, and so I bought the most budget kit around with a terrible controller. It wasn't any more than a few hours before that controller completely failed on me, so I bought a slightly more expensive but still very cheap controller. And believe it or not, that controller didn't fail on me once, but instead twice. So 3 failed controller experiences, all of which took multiple weeks to sort through. Had I simply bought a better controller for a bit more money, I would have saved myself so much time and effort. So that's number 3, invest in better gear, it's gonna save you the headache. Next is best demonstrated by my fairly recent purchase of the Pocket Radio. This is a super budget friendly controller that is really small and just made of a whole bunch of light plastic parts. I also got myself set up with an HD0 Meteor 75 Pro, and of course, HD0 goggles to be able to fly it. Why am I telling you this though? Well, it's because it's all got one big thing in common: size. My biggest roadblock to flying in new places or actually taking my gear away on trips was always because of the size, the weight, and the price. I've found with buying a cheap controller, I'm much more likely to just throw it in my bag or car without worrying about it. And to pair that with a really fun small drone, I've got myself the perfect little setup for like lightweight travel. So number 4, I'm saying you'll go on more adventures if you keep things compact, small, and inexpensive. Look, I won't lie, I'm definitely a little bit nervous to press this button again, but in the name of adventure, I'm gonna do it. I guess it's broken then. Now, if you're always striving to improve your flying, I need you to stop. Wait, what? But why? Well, it's all because of this one thing. I went through a phase where I was seriously hyper-focused on just getting better at flying, and I think for the time it served its purpose, and it did serve me well. However, it led to complete burnout. At the time, I didn't feel it, I couldn't see it coming, and I was simply oblivious to the whole situation. When it finally hit me, I can't even begin to explain just how crap it felt, but burnout isn't what I'm here to focus on right now. Number 5 is forcing yourself to always improve isn't sustainable and never has an endpoint to hit. By constantly striving for improvement as the end goal, you'll come to realize at some point or other that you can't actually get there, which is a really sucky realization to find out. So focus on periods of improvement, but give yourself other goals to work towards other than just get better. Alrighty, number 6 is one of the best realizations that ever happened to me. I had thought for so many months that there wasn't actually much to the whole hobby, and that especially here in little New Zealand, that I was all alone. I practically tricked myself into believing that there was no one else around me who was interested in flying FPV, and I say tricked because, well, you guessed it, there were plenty of people around me. Number 6 is simply meet new people ASAP. Trust me, even if you aren't a super sociable person, having times when you do your hobby with other like-minded people is just like one of the best feelings ever. If you, like me, start up FPV with an open prop drone or a large Cinewhoop, then this is the piece of advice that you need to hear. You're especially going to love this one too if you want an excuse to go and spend a bit of money. And when I say a bit, I truly mean it. This isn't going to break your bank, but it is going to blow your mind. Number 7 is get a tiny whoop. You'll never regret just how fun they are and how durable they are too. Honestly, that one line wraps everything up perfectly here. They may be small, but the amount of fun my tiny whoop has brought me is simply incomparable to its price and its size. Now, this is a fun and very controversial one, but I still feel as though anyone who thinks in this mindset is stuck in the old school ways of the hobby. If you want to be an up-to-date hobbyist, I think it's important to take into consideration that things change and evolve over time, even if we don't want them to. That's why advice number 8 is ignore those who tell you that you need to build a drone. We are now in a time where it's easier than ever for someone new to get into FPV with a pre-build, and you know what? I flippin' love that. Yes, there are certainly going to be times where knowing how to build your own drone is going to be beneficial, like if you break something or, a component fails and needs replacing. However, even if this does happen and you have no idea what to do, there's always someone else who knows and is happy to help you out. In the long run, I still do recommend that you eventually learn how a drone works and how to put one together, but if the time isn't right for you straight away, don't feel forced to. Oh man, number 9 is like really one of those things that really changed FPV for me. Yet again. If you didn't know already, I started out flying FPV solely to capture cinematic video footage for my videos. Nothing more, nothing less. As time went on, I started learning how to do some cinematic tricks, and that's about it. What I had no idea about though was the other 3 worlds of FPV that I was completely neglecting and in turn missing out on. I truly never used to understand why people would really enjoy any form of racing, regardless of if it was horses, cars, or people, let alone drones, but ever since I attended my first FPV race event and have given it a shot, I've been 110% hooked. Similar things can be said about freestyle too. I could never understand why I would want to fly around in a small place that doesn't look cinematic and do things with my drone that aren't slow and smooth. Again, all it took was a few sessions of trying it out with my friends to find that the challenge of hitting gaps and controlling the drone in such a different way was all sorts of fun. So with that being said, number 9 is try out every different niche of flying that's long range, racing, freestyle, and cinematic. Seriously, you're not ever gonna regret trying them out. Okay, number 10. Back when I was starting out, I bought an awesome FPV drone kit with the expectation of being able to soar down mountains and film super cinematic footage. After all, this was the exact sort of thing that I had seen on all forms of social media, so surely I would be able to do it after some practice, right? Well, lack of skills aside, the issue I faced here was nothing to do with the fact that I had bought a Tiny Hawk 2 with a crappy pair of goggles that had a shockingly tiny range. Nope, instead it was all to do with my expectations of what I would be able to do with it. I really thought that I would be able to take this budget drone kit and send it super far away with a GoPro strapped to it, just like a much more expensive drone. Honestly, I have no issue with the fact that I bought a budget-friendly FPV kit, as without it I may have never continued on with the hobby. However, my expectations were set way too high for the price that I paid. So number 10 is, if you can't afford expensive gear, don't rush to buy it. Get the cheap stuff for fun, but understand the downfalls are real. The 11th thing is one that Bot Grinder, a really well-respected OG of the hobby, brought up in a video essay earlier this year. Without going into tons of detail, he mentioned that influencers were ruining the hobby by essentially becoming shills of companies. And you know what? I don't 100% agree with everything he mentioned in his video. However, for this part, I couldn't agree more. The reality is, right now, companies are sending products out to YouTubers for free, and way too many YouTubers are more interested in keeping a positive relationship with the company rather than with their audience, which is you guys. This leads to positive reviews of crappy products that doesn't actually highlight any of the downsides, leaving the viewers with an untruthful perception of what the product will actually do for them. That's all to say that number 11 is don't trust every reviewer online. The OGs are usually your best bet and will serve you well in the long run. If you need some good ideas on who you can actually trust at this point, I would point you towards Joshua Bardwell, Mads Tech, Original Dobo, and UAV Futures. Of course, there are plenty more OGs, but these are the guys that will be able to help you get started the best and least biased way possible. Alrighty, this next one is something that the more you do, the better it gets, and I'm not talking about practicing your skills here either, even though that is indeed the case here too, but recently I've been trying to catch up with my friends Sam and Julius every week for a flight sesh. Whether that means a whole day of flying or just a couple of hours, it really doesn't matter. Instead, the reasoning behind it is really simple. When I fly alone, it can indeed sometimes be a nice getaway, but for the most part, it generally feels somewhat lonely. Flying with friends makes even those times that just kinda suck that tiny little bit more fun, and really just a more enjoyable experience. It's for that reason that number 12 is invite your friends over to fly more with you. The best thing about this hobby for me has been finding company that actually gets along with me and shares similar thoughts and interests as well. Okay, well, let's just do a bit of a fast track through the next few. Now, don't get me wrong here, these are all just as important, but I don't want you getting bored, so let's do it. When you have no idea what the heck to do, feel stuck in your progress, or just don't know how to bind your controller to a drone, join a Discord group and just ask. No one's gonna judge you for it, and no question is too stupid. We've all been where you are at some point in time. Next is to not get too hung up on the whole beta flight thing. It really does seem complex at first. Well, I mean, at least it did for me, but over time, as you start to take things on, you'll find that it gets just a whole bunch easier. In saying that though, I do also have to say I still consider myself a beta flight noob. Like, honestly, half the stuff that is within the program, I have no idea how to use, and I still haven't spent the entire amount of time needed to learn how to tune a drone properly either. So, plenty more things to learn on my side too. This next one spins back around to the whole invite your friends over to fly more often. Whenever I have that subconscious feeling of just somebody else watching me while I'm flying, just makes me fly so much better. This makes it so that whenever I'm flying with other people, I tend to see the most progress in my skills, and adding on to that as well, whenever I fly around people who are better than me, which, let's be real, is probably pretty much every single time, I can just ask them questions or for their opinion on something, which is just invaluable. Maybe this one is more my problem than it is anyone else's, but let me know if it affects you too. Whenever I'm trying new tricks or tackling a new course, I tend to find that I get increasingly frustrated when I'm unable to do the new thing well. Like when trying my first freestyle trick, the Rubik's Cube, I couldn't nail that for a good few days, and so over those few days I would always leave feeling pretty damn frustrated. My advice here, and I still need to listen to this one more myself, is learn new tricks, but don't get frustrated when you can't master them straight away. Now, this piece of advice hasn't only worked really well for me in the past, but it's also helped out multiple other pilots right here in our community. A little while ago, I gave everybody in the FPV newsletter a chance to have their best flight footage judged by both myself and my friend Julius, who's been a pilot for over 8 years now. We both gave our thoughts and next steps for each submission, adding in whatever value we thought would work best for each person. From this, we had responses back saying just how much this advice had pushed them forward and how they might have never felt ready for the next step. This alone is more than enough evidence to validate the 17th piece of advice. Have someone better than you watch your flying and give honest feedback. Next time an opportunity like this comes up, I'd recommend that you take it. You just never know how much it could change your skills in the long run. Piggybacking onto that too is good old Mount Stupid. This was me when I started out. Then over the next 6 months of FPV, I got to this point, which was when my perception of how much I know about the hobby was as high as it could go. From here, I found out through trying to fix my drone that I hadn't a blimmin' clue what I was doing and fell straight off the edge of Mount Stupid, right back down to the bottom thinking I know absolutely nothing. The higher you climb up the metaphorical mountain of thinking you know everything in the beginning means that there is only going to be so much more of a drop for you to fall back down on the way back down. The more humble you can keep yourself in thinking you know everything there is to know, the easier your descent is going to be from Mount Stupid. Oh, okay, here's a fun one. Previous to my first time partaking in the New Zealand Open race event, I had gone out to practice with my friends day in and day out, but nothing could have prepared me for the feelings that I was going to experience on the day of the race event. As I sat down for my first race heat, I found my fingers, hand, and even my legs shaking uncontrollably. I was literally so nervous and so excited that I had hindered my flying so badly. Like, I knew that I was capable of actually doing the course, but thanks to my nerves, I was struggling to even get one lap in. The thing that changed it for me though was doing what I usually do when I'm having an anxious moment. So my advice here is if you get overly anxious at races, listen to chill music in your earphones. It'll steady those hands and just clear the mind. Alrighto, that now brings us to number 20, the halfway point of our book. And it's also taken me back 730 days now. You know, I do wonder what the heck I was doing wherever I am in this particular point in time 730 days ago.
What would you say that your biggest mistake has been within the FPV space?
I've definitely crashed a few drones in places that I've never been able to retrieve them.
Time is really short. That does not feel like it was that long ago. Okay, we're just gonna quickfire the crap out of the remaining 20 pieces of FPV advice. Starting off with, the more that you try to validate your knowledge against other people, the more you're gonna end up realizing how little you actually know. Get out for those sunrises and the sunsets when they're around. Be as generous as you possibly can be. There's always going to be a weird way that it comes on back to you later down the track, but for the most part, it just makes the FPV community real and alive. Help others get through things that you've already experienced and just share the knowledge. It really does benefit everybody. Learn how to solder before you try and build your first FPV drone. Do your research before you buy any gear and make sure it's actually worth you buying. You're gonna break things and it's gonna cost you money. It's reality. Practice flying gated tracks in the simulator more than you think you should be, because as soon as you start freestyling, it's gonna show in how well you can actually do your tricks within gaps more than you've ever done before. You feel burnt out, take a break and do something different. Except that some people just aren't gonna like drones. Let that be their problem, not yours. Keep to the laws within your area and fly away from people. Just don't ruin the hobby for everybody. If someone looks interested while you're flying FPV, just invite them over and let them have a look at your DVR. Share your experiences, findings, and mistakes. Don't be put off by the thought of building a failing quad. Everybody has, and everybody will. Always allow for twice the amount of time that you think you'll need when you go out to actually fly. Just ask questions, no matter how simple they might seem. Everything new is always going to feel overwhelming. Just know that the stage is going to pass sooner rather than later. You don't need every type of drone or every bit of gear to get the most out of the hobby. Pack your drone in the car whenever you're going on a road trip. Know that everything you're experiencing right now has been experienced somewhere or other by another person. There are always going to be answers, and that things are just going to get easier as time goes on. Jeepers, alright. Well, I think this is actually it, and damn, I guess I've changed clothes as well. We've now gone back 1,461 days back to when I was just starting out with FPV drones. In fact, this right here is actually exactly where I used to live, which is kind of crazy to see in person again now. Anyways, I wanted to leave this one last piece of advice for the very end of this video, because it's, in my opinion, the most valuable thing that I've ever heard. Whenever possible, always try your best to live by this quote. Which is more important, asked Big Panda. The journey or the destination? The company, said Tiny Dragon. I think after this entire journey back through my last 4 years, even though I've had some challenging times and points where I nearly gave up, I wouldn't actually change a thing. I'm so happy to have my friends that I've made through this hobby, and I'm equally as happy to have you here watching these videos. It really does mean the world to me. So actually, instead of giving younger Brody this booklet, who I'm sure is probably in that caravan right now, I think I'd like to give it to you. And if you want to keep these 40 pieces of advice and share them around, I've put a link down in the description box below where you can actually download this booklet. And of course, if saving you money isn't a good enough reason to go and download it, it's not going to cost you any either. It's completely free. All right, I've got 1,400 and something days to travel back through now, so I'll see you again soon. Anyone seen the time machine? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hey, don't start stressing, I'm here. Don't stress, I managed to find it again. It was just hiding at the top of a tree, but we're good now, and I have my time machine back, okay? What's not good though, and something that I didn't cover in any detail in that last video, is a very overlooked safety critical issue that most people will end up facing. This next video in the module dives deep into what this issue is, everything you need to learn about it, and what could happen if you choose to neglect it. It's not anything good, by the way, and honestly, it kind of scares the crap out of me, so this is an important one. Ever wonder what happens when you try and charge an unsafe LiPo? Well, here, this is an unsafe LiPo, this is a charger, and this is what happens. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to make sure that this doesn't happen to you, how to safely charge and dispose of LiPo batteries, and then finally we'll come right back here to see how this fire actually happened in the first place. So this is your LiPo battery, or maybe even this is your LiPo battery, or take it a step further, maybe this is your LiPo battery. Look, these are all completely different sizes of LiPo batteries, and you could have any one of them. The cool thing here though is that as long as you know the basics, you're going to be able to understand any shape, any size, or any color of LiPo that you find. Let's just grab this bigger one here for the example of today's video. You're going to see that it's got this big number followed by the letters MAH, a smaller number with a C, an even smaller number with an S, another with a V, and then the last one with a WH. Let's start off in the middle with the most important number that's got an S next to it. This is how many cells your battery has got inside of it. Think of a cell like a mini battery inside of your battery. Each of them are connected in what's called series, basically meaning that all of the cells' power is added up with one another. So a 1S battery like this one here has only got one singular cell. A 4S battery has got 4 cells, and then a 6S battery like this one has got 6 cells. Next, let's run over what that little V number means. The V stands for voltage, which pretty much tells you how fast your drone is going to go. The higher the voltage, the faster the motors will spin. Now we've just figured out that the mini batteries inside your complete battery, the cells, get added together to get more power. That means that the voltage and the S rating are linked together. The more cells you have, the more voltage you'll have, meaning more power. But if each cell adds power to your battery, then how much voltage does each small battery cell have? The resting voltage of one singular LiPo cell is 3.7 volts. That's not what the voltage is when it's fully charged, and it's also not what the voltage is when it's fully discharged. It simply is about in the middle of the two. We will go through what the correct voltage is for a charged and discharged LiPo soon, but for now, if we take that resting voltage of 3.7 volts per cell and add each of the cells together, we reach that V number here. So on my 6S battery here, if I add 3.7 volts for every cell I have together, which is 6, we reach 22.2. If you have a 4-cell battery like this one here, you would only add 3.7 together 4 times, making it 14.8 volts. That's how we reach that V number. Both of these are normal LiPo batteries, but there is, however, the exception of LiPo batteries that have got HV next to their voltage number. What the HV stands for is high voltage, which means each of the cells inside are rated to be able to charge higher than a normal LiPo battery. But we'll get to this with the charging side of things later in the video. It's just worth noting now if you're wondering why the voltage might be different to the calculations we just made, if what you have right now in front of you is a high voltage battery. How about this big number here with the MAH? The MAH stands for milliamp hours, which tells us what capacity the battery is. The bigger this number, the more charge your battery can hold, generally meaning the longer you'll be able to fly your drone on one battery. It's basically like a fuel tank. Bigger number, more fuel, smaller number, less fuel. Something we will need to know how to do soon as well is turn the milliamp hours into amp hours. To do this, simply divide your milliamp hour number by 1000. So for me here with this 1500 milliamp hour battery, if I wanted to work out what the capacity is in amp hours, not milliamp hours, I would divide 1500 by 1000, giving me a result of 1.5 amp hours. If you had a 750 milliamp hour battery, divide that by 1000, you would have 0.75 amp hours. What amp hours and milliamp hours tell us is how much power the battery could constantly put out for 1 hour. So my 1500 milliamp hour battery could, in theory, put out 1500 milliamps, also known as 1.5 amps, for 1 hour straight. I say in theory because realistically, you will never use the complete capacity of the battery, as it's more than likely to damage it. Anyway, you'll see how this all becomes useful very shortly. The fourth number to understand here is the C number, or C rating. So far, the voltage and capacity aspects have both been fairly easy to understand, as they both have a direct impact on the drone. So C rating can be a tad harder to understand, but I'll keep it as simple as possible for you. The C rating here simply stands for how fast you can discharge the battery safely. How fast can your battery deliver power to your drone? If you think about the fuel tank example that we used before, think about the C rating as how big of a hole you have to get the fuel out of the tank. The bigger the hole, the faster you can drain the fuel, which for us would mean a higher C rating. Whereas the smaller the hole, the slower you'd be able to drain the fuel tank, meaning a lower C rating. Now, to figure out what the C rating actually means to us, we need to turn it into amps. By doing this, we're figuring out how many amps the battery can deliver to your drone continuously without damaging itself. If we go back to turning our capacity from milliamp hours to amp hours, and we take that amp hour number, so for this battery 1.5 amp hours, we can then multiply our amp hour number with our C rating to figure out how many amps our battery can continuously deliver to our drone. So for me, that'll be 1.5 amps times 100 C rating equals 150 continuous amps. But the important note here is that because 100 C is the same as 150 amps for this battery, that would make 1 C the same as 1.5 amps. Get it? 1 C is 1.5 amps, 2 C would be 3 amps, 3C would be 4.5 amps, and that's how 100C is 150 amps. We'll be using this knowledge to select our charging rate shortly, so try your best to wrap your head around it, and if you need to, watch that little section again. It's pretty important. The fifth and final number on your battery is followed by a W and H. These stand for watt hours. I'm not going to go into detail here about what they are or how to calculate them. However, it's important to note that this is the number that airlines use to figure out if you're able to bring your battery on their plane or not. Many airlines allow up to 100 watt-hour batteries, but anything over that could be prohibited. So it's just useful to know so that if you do plan on traveling with batteries, you know what to check online and where to find that rating on your battery. Mine on the 6S is 33.3 watt hours, so in theory, it should be allowed on an airline. Okay, so that's a ton of maths and a lot to take in. I'm going to run through a quick recap on what the most important takeaways are from all that, so you know what you'll need to continue on with this video. Firstly, the S rating. This is the number of cells inside of your battery and relates to how much power you'll be able to supply your drone with. Secondly, the voltage. This is the number that is the result of each cell's voltage added together, and remembering each cell has a resting voltage of 3.7 volts. Thirdly, the capacity. This is the big number with milliamp hours and tells you how much fuel you have to give your drone. It can be easily converted into amp hours by dividing it by 1000. Fourthly, the C rating. This is how fast your battery can discharge safely and can be converted to amp draw by multiplying your capacity in amp hours with the C rating. Fifth, and finally, this is the number used by airlines to tell you if your battery is allowed on the plane or not. I actually sent an email out to my FPV newsletter just last week helping over 100 other pilots understand how to safely store, charge, and dispose of LiPo batteries, so they kind of got this early, and if you want to join them, there is a link in the description down below. But with that all being said, let's cover it here as well so you aren't missing out on any crucial charging information. The first thing is to take a step back from the batteries themselves and actually find yourself a quality charger with a safe charging environment. A quality charger is going to be subjective on who you talk to, but for me, it's this little guy. It's got a balance lead port, an XT60 port here, and also a screen that shows me each of the individual cells, which is a super important feature. A safe charging environment, however, is just as crucial as the charger, and the word environment actually comes down to a few factors. Are you keeping an eye on the charger? Is the charger near flammable objects or surfaces? And how healthy is your battery? Think of it like a three-way risk management pendulum. If you plan on leaving your charger unattended, your physical environment and battery health need to be excellent. If you plan on charging on a flammable surface, you need to be there with the charger, and your battery health also needs to be excellent. Finally, if your battery health is terrible, you'll need to make sure your eyes are glued to that charger and your physical charging environment is excellent. They each affect one another in terms of risk management, and honestly, in a perfect world, you'd have all three bars sitting at excellent all the time. That means you're there watching the charger, you're charging in a non-flammable area, and you know your battery health is great. The lower each of these bars are from excellent, the higher your risk factor is, and we want to minimize that as much as possible. Okay, so now that you know how and where you should be charging, let's move on to the actual charging side of things. On your battery, you're going to have a balance lead and you're going to have a main XT60 cable. Now, on smaller batteries, you may indeed have a smaller balance lead and also a smaller XT cable. Now, this is an XT30, this is an XT60. All that is in relation to is their size difference. There's also a slight size difference between each of our balance leads. This is 4 cells, this is 6 cells. So I'll put the 4-cell battery away for now. We're going to work on the 6-cell battery here. Now what you want to do is you want to plug in obviously your XT60 connector. That's telling this entire, that's telling your charger right now that there is one battery connected to it. And then this, we plug our balance lead here in. Now we're telling our charger that we have got 6 individual cells inside of this, and you can see it's automatically selected on the charger that we indeed have 6 cells. Some chargers won't automatically select this, so we're going to come to our charge screen. We've got a few options. The first is obviously we're going to come in and we're going to hit charge. That's our main thing right now. Next one is what type of battery is it? We are not charging any of the others aside from a LiPo right now. The condition is 4.2 volts. That's telling you how much it should charge each of these up to. We've already worked that one out for this pack, is that it is 4.2 volts. If it's a high voltage pack, you can click in there and you can charge up to a little bit higher, but majority of packs will go only up to 4.2 volts. If you go any higher than that, then you're going to start risking fires because these batteries are not rated to go higher. Now I already mentioned that this charger has automatically selected a 6S battery. If however your one hasn't, you come here, this is 6S, we already worked out by the S there, so 6S. If I plug this battery in, we'd be charging a 4S battery. So 6S, and then we come down to the current. Now the current is how fast it's charging this battery, and this is where the C rating comes in. So we already know that 100C is equal to 150 amps. So what does that mean that 1C is? Well, 1C is 1.5 amps, and we only want to charge at 1C. Now, the reason you don't want to charge at 1C is because it's the safest way to charge, it's the safest speed. You're not pumping a whole bunch of amps into your battery, which is what we want. We only want a certain amount. Sometimes you're going to find that people charge at 2C, which for this battery would be 1.5 plus 1.5 amps. So we're at 3 amps. So 2C on this battery is 3 amps. So if we really wanted to, I could come all the way down. There we go. And go 3 amps, and I'll charge it at 3 amps. Now, that is more risky than sticking with 1.5 amps and charging at 1C. So for the majority of your times charging, I recommend only charging at 1C. It's going to take more or less an hour, but I promise you it is the safest route to take. So please, if you have the option, always go for 1C, or even potentially lower if you really want to. So after that, you can hit start. We're going to come up with a starting, and now we've got each of our individual cells here all charging up, and our charger is telling us, yay, great, everything is balanced out here, and we're balancing it as we're charging. Now if I come down, we're going to actually see this other screen, and this is resistance. Now the resistance of each of these individual little cells here is basically telling us, in a way, how healthy each of the cells are. So for me, all of these numbers are fairly similar. Cell number 5 does appear to be slightly damaged, and that can just be from being hit, but it's nothing drastic. Right now everything's sitting at 12 ohms of resistance, 13, 11.9, 13, 9.3. So they're all pretty much the same resistance, meaning they're all being charged at the same rate with the same ease of charge. Generally speaking, a brand new battery is going to have 5 to 15 milliohms of resistance straight out the box. That's a very general number, but that's around about where it's going to sit. A used battery is probably going to be somewhere more around the 15 to 20 milliohms mark. And then once one of your cells starts to reach a 20 to 25 milliohm resistance, that's when you're going to want to start thinking about looking at getting a new battery. And anything that's upwards of 25 milliohms, I'm going to recommend that you retire that battery. That's not a great place to be. It's worth saying here too that there are actually a couple of other ways that you can assess whether your battery is in good health or bad health. These are the main ones that I'm going to recommend that you try. Firstly, can you smell a fruity or a sweet smell? If yes, then it probably means that you've punctured one or more of the cells in your battery, meaning that the chemicals are escaping out and that's what you can actually smell. Secondly, is your battery super puffy? If yes, then this is probably a great point in time to take it as a great warning sign and always keep a super heavy eye on your battery while it's charging. Thirdly, does your battery get hot while charging? If this is a yes and you're charging at the recommended 1C rate, then that's probably a really good point in time to take a look at the resistance of each cell and see if one or more of them are higher. If that is the case, then well, maybe that cell is not too good. It's always good practice to just consistently be assessing your batteries pretty much on every single charge, and if you crash badly, then go and check your battery, smell it, make sure that it's actually okay, and that you're not going to be trying to fly something that's got a punctured cell. And on the flip side of that, if you happen to notice that any of these signs do become apparent with one or more of your batteries, just make sure that you're keeping a super close eye on that particular battery whilst it's charging. You should be keeping an eye on your batteries at all points in time while charging, but just really pay attention. Now, if I put that battery aside for a moment and I actually bring in this battery, this is a really bad battery. Now look, they actually don't look too bad, like too different, right? They look fairly similar. What you are going to notice, however, is that this battery has actually got a little bit of brown tint to this cell. Now, that cell is, as you're going to find out in a second, completely and utterly dead. So if I plug in the balance charger here, the balance lead, we're going to be able to see we've only got 5 cells showing up and at 19.1 volts. Cell number 4, which is the brown burnt one, is indeed a dead cell. So all these others are at 3.8, 3.8, 3.8, 3.8, 3.8. They're fine. Cell number 4 does not exist right now. So that means that this battery should not be charged. Instead, this battery needs to be disposed of, and I'll be buying a new battery. You might now be wondering, well, great, how the heck am I supposed to get rid of a battery if it's just going to catch fire in my bin? Well, it's really quite simple. The best route to take is with the use of a proprietary slow discharger. This little guy for my flight cost me $2 and will take a few days to bring the voltage down to 0. Once it's totally discharged, I'd pop the balance lead into my charger to make sure there's no cells that have charge in it, and then I'd take it to a local hobby shop or a recycling center so they can be recycled properly. Again, I did cover all of this in my newsletter last week, and I actually sent out a PDF guide that you can stick next to your charger to make sure that you know all the things to remember. If you want that PDF, I've left a separate link down in the description below. It's totally free. However, for the purpose of this video, I've intentionally gone against everything to make sure that we end up with a fired result, which is what we want. So let's rewind time and watch how this battery disaster unfolded from the start. Alright, so first up, this is definitely our bad battery, and we can check that by plugging in our balance lead. So if we plug it in, you can actually see there that there is no 4th cell visible. It's probably safe to say that this battery's 4th cell is completely screwed and means you should never charge it. So we're going to charge it. Now, I want to make it extremely clear here. I am not recommending that you do any of this to any of your LiPo batteries. This entire experiment is solely to show you the true power that is stored inside of one of these compact packs. Anyways, I hit start and waited for the battery to overcharge up, but even after 90 minutes of overcharging, it still appeared that we've not had any signs of a bad battery. Well, we've not had any signs of a battery that's about to explode. So that's good, we'll just wait. Let's take a seat. We waited for yet another 30 minutes, still not experiencing any of the signs of a battery about to go, like smelling a sweet smell, swelling of a cell, and well, I didn't actually want to put my hand anywhere near it, so I have no idea if it got hot, but it was really starting to play games with my mind. Right now, the 5 cells that are active in there are at 5.4 volts. Keep in mind, the maximum you want to charge your LiPo to is 4.2 volts. per cell. And we're now at 5.4 per cell. I'm a little nervous. I don't know about the surroundings. At the same time, I also do like my household. But I also want to demonstrate the dangers of the fire to you guys. So, this is my house.
We're going to be using it as an example of what can happen if you charge one of these batteries.
Yeah, no, we are definitely not doing that. But I won't lie, after waiting for nearly 2 hours, my nerves were starting to reach a peak. I had no idea how big this fire was going to be. I had no idea how much longer it was going to take, and I started to have serious second thoughts about doing this experiment altogether. What if a cell flies out of the box? Could my house catch on fire? What if the flames are 5 meters tall and the fire brigade gets one of my neighbors? Who can this even Ghostbusters? Oh, fuck this, man. I actually can't handle the stress anymore. Nah, fuck it. So yeah, I hit it with a very sharp spade, and to be quite honest here, I was super disappointed at the result. I think we only got one.
What?
One cell. All I could hope for was that I had indeed only punctured one single cell, meaning that we would still have at least 4 more charged up cells to be able to demonstrate this with. Look, all it took was a few more cell punches to really highlight the dangers of what a LiPo can do. But before you start thinking, well, I'm not going to have mine with a spade, so this is never going to happen to me, you aren't quite on the right track there. If one or more of your cells in any given LiPo do wear out enough and become a hazard, this sort of fire can 100% occur while charging without any external things like a spade. I mean, check out the cell just erupting into flames after it got too hot from the cell next to it burning. The fire burst may look short, but the amount of heat they put off in that short period is more than enough to catch anything flammable around it on fire. Looking back, it is truly amazing to see the power that each individual cell stores inside of it, but it's also a fierce reminder of what could happen if you find yourself getting complacent with LiPo batteries. So I hope that you now have an understanding of the true dangers of LiPo batteries and just how bad it actually can get. I mean, check out the battery lead here, that's not much of a battery anymore. To be honest with you though, I actually used to neglect safe charging for the longest time while getting started, and I used to use a 4-button charger. Now, that's not the only thing that I regret doing in the FPV drone hobby though. In fact, I have made hundreds of purchases in this hobby alone. Some of them have been well worth it and amazing, while others have been a terrible waste of money. Just before we can get into that though, I first need you to understand why you shouldn't always listen to the traditional advice of building your first FPV drone, what to do when a Karen approaches you, and yes, I busted out the old person mask again for this one. You're welcome. But also how to stop the inevitable FPV burnout. Right now, you're on track towards at least one of the 5 traps that snatch the hopes and dreams away from every beginner FPV pilot. So in today's video, I'll be showing you exactly what these 5 mistakes are, how to avoid getting trapped by them in the future, and why you should probably be going against traditional advice and not actually build your first FPV drone. Let's get you up to speed. Trap 1 is something that I fell face first into when I was first getting started. In fact, all of the traps in this video are actually something that I've experienced firsthand. Anyways, back when I was a beginner, I started off aggressively learning and obsessing over everything in the hobby. I was figuring out the sticks, understanding how my OSD worked, and even started to wrap my head around Betaflight. I know, quite impressive. This was of course great, but I soon found myself at the top of a very tall metaphorical mountain. And it was actually a mountain that I had created totally by mistake. This particular mountain was called Mount Stupid, and it was made up of truckloads of self-confidence, all of which were stacked carelessly on top of each other. One day, after crashing one of my pre-built Cinewhoops, I figured that it needed repairing, so I took it all apart, found what I thought was the problem with it, and then started to try to fix it with some solder or something. It was at this exact moment that Mount Stupid suddenly started to come crumbling down. I had gotten myself into such a mess that I really had no idea how to put my drone back together, even though prior I had been certain that I had all the skills and knowledge I needed to perfectly execute this build. Had I recognized earlier that I didn't actually know that much about the hobby, I would have totally avoided building myself a super tall mountain that in the end I had to climb all the way back down from. Yeah, delusional self-confidence is a very hard lesson to learn, and although this trap is nearly impossible to completely avoid, you can at least minimize the size of the mountain that you create for yourself by minimizing the ego and staying as open-minded as possible. Alrighty, this next trap is yet another stupidly common trap that I see beginners falling into. Nearly every day, I see a comment or an email saying that they are on their own and that their town is too small to find other people. And look, For my first 3 years in this hobby, I honestly believed that for myself. Yeah, for over 1,000 days, I believed that no one else was around me that wanted to fly and that no groups existed within hours of my home. With this belief cemented in my mind, it's with no surprise that I slowly but surely became less interested in FPV and just watched myself reach the point where I didn't touch my controller for weeks. I honestly had reached the point where if something dramatic didn't change, I probably would have just let it all slide away and left FPV behind in the dust. Obviously, as I'm talking to you here today, you're probably thinking that something dramatic must have happened. And you're damn well right. I ended up attending a race event 5.5 hours away, met a whole bunch of like-minded people, and then furthermore made it my mission to find new friends locally when I got back. Much to my surprise, all it took was for me to scroll through 5 weeks of Facebook posts to then stumble across a post from my now close friends, Sam and Julius. They've both contributed so much to my love of the hobby and just my life in general, so to think that I would have never met them if I'd stuck with my cemented belief is just kind of crazy. So yeah, putting 2 and 2 together, I found that there were indeed like-minded people who have the same love for FPV in my small town of 9,000 people. It was just a case of actively searching and trying to network. Okay, let me ask you something, and I just need you to be as honest as possible with yourself. When you think about flying FPV drones, either on your own or with friends, what is your why? Your deep reason behind actually going out to fly? For me, I can now confidently say that if I'm heading out for a freestyle session with the boys, I am purely heading out to have fun. However, take me back a year ago and ask me that same question, and I would have given you a radically different answer. Instead of heading out to have a good time or hang out with my mates, no matter how hard I tried to hide it from myself, I would always, and I mean always, be trying to improve my skills. It would not matter if I was flying whoops, if I was racing, freestyling, or even just trying to do chill cinematics. Every single flight needed to aim towards improvement in some way or other. Even earlier this year, I actually fell into this trap for myself while training for my first national race event. Every day, I needed to be getting faster times, taking smoother corners, and just having fewer crashes. But to my detriment, the amount of stress that this put on me subconsciously was just insane. It actually ended up resulting in a total FPV burnout not long after, where I didn't touch a controller again for probably a few weeks. Now, I'm not saying don't train hard for something that you want to pursue, because I really do believe that hard work will always outplay talent. However, it is equally as important to just allow yourself to have some time for you. That means grabbing the quads, texting your mates to just go on an adventure, and go out with absolutely zero intentions at all. This really is easier said than done, but once you strike a good balance between the two, you'll actually watch your progress skyrocket. Now, let's dive headfirst into a scenario that I dread to think of happening to you. Karens. If you aren't aware of the term Karen, you can essentially think of them as the type of person who's gonna complain, abuse, and threaten others with little to no reason backing them. Now, let's be real here. If you've actually been lucky enough to have avoided a Karen all of your life, you might want to try and check in the mirror. I'm kidding. Unless. About 3 years ago, I had an older gentleman come storming up to me with his phone out recording me. I ended up greeting him as he trotted up to me, which was only met with him slinging some mildly offensive words my way and telling me how I was going to end up in the paper for spying on people. No, I'm really not joking. These are his literal words. I actually offered to show him the footage I was recording, which happened to be of a job that I was flying for over land that I had explicit consent for, but he wasn't having any of it. Now, there were 2 ways that I could have taken this from here. The first being to start telling this gentleman how he was totally in the wrong, that he wasn't actually allowed to be filming me as he was on private property, and that he was simply just being a bit of a jerk. However, instead of throwing that shade right back on him, I took the civilized approach of being as kind and respectful as possible, and you know what? It worked in my favor. The gentleman dropped his defensive guard, stopped his recording, and kind of just grunted with defeat as he turned around and left. Absolutely no more words spoken.
Oh my god!
This has been the only negative encounter that I've personally had with someone in public, which when compared to the number of positive experiences I've actually had with people, is a very small percentage. I have noticed many people looking my way before I actually put the goggles on, and then either having my friend or my fiance tell me that someone was coming up to talk to me. Thankfully, to relieve your social anxiety that I'm sure has just built up, 9 out of the 10 people who come up to me are just super interested in having a look at what I'm doing. Usually they end up telling me that they either have a cheap photography drone or that they've been looking into drones for a while, and then after seeing this footage from my goggles, they would be going home to buy an FPV drone for themselves today. That's some super cool stuff because you're actually helping people get into the hobby, so just keep that in mind. Not every stranger is a Karen, but they're going to be out there. What might actually cause a few Karens to come out though in these comments below this video is from what I'm about to say. Now look, I'm not telling you this because I want to stir up the comments, but it is just the reality of making videos with opinions in them. Anyways, how many times have you heard from people that you look up to that you should be spending your time on a simulator and then at the desk learning how to build? Well, when I was starting out, I literally could not escape this, and I just accepted the fact that I would have to learn how to fly and also learn how to build. And this is why for 2 years I held off entirely and actually forgot about FPV drones altogether. Thankfully, that desire did rekindle after I came across some epic footage on Instagram, and just seeing these epic clips made me crave learning this whole FPV thing again. But at the time, I was living in a caravan, so the building electronic things was just not an option. So because of my situation, I ended up going against that conventional advice and bought myself a fully assembled drone kit. The simple fact that this kit was a no-stress, ready-to-go kit was actually what kept me in the hobby. Had I encountered any of the issues that I have now since faced while building FPV drones, I genuinely think I would have just given up and called it a day. But hey, here I am, 4 years later, loving this hobby so damn much, and it's all thanks to having an easy alternative to getting started. Pre-builds. Now, before you head out and buy that one random pre-built FPV drone that you saw on AliExpress yesterday, it is super important to understand that not every pre-build is made equally. In fact, there have been 2 pre-built FPV drones that I've purchased in the past that I've regretted buying. So in this next video, I'm going to show you exactly what not to buy, why I regret the purchases I made, and how you can make sure that you're not going to make similar mistakes in the future as well. Over the past couple of years, I have bought a whole bunch of FPV stuff, and for the most part, it's generally pretty great, but there have also been some purchases that are downright terrible. So these are the 5 FPV purchases that I regret buying, starting with the least expensive and going to the most expensive. You may remember a few months ago, I built my first ever racing drone, and to stick with the racing tradition, I went with an analog setup for the drone. So, it gives me the lowest possible latency. Naturally, however, along with that, I also needed an analog goggles setup so I could actually fly, but instead of doing my true research, I ended up going down a route I now regret. Yep, these things that I'm holding, these are my analog converted DJI goggles V2 that in total cost me $670. However, because I actually only regret the conversion side of things, not the actual goggles V2 themselves, the parts needed to convert it were around $190. Now, why do I regret that conversion, you may be thinking? Honestly, at first, I didn't. I thought it was the best thing ever because, there was no need to go buy a new set of goggles, and quite frankly, I reckon they look pretty sick. What I didn't factor in, however, was the smaller things. The fact that every time you boot these goggles up, you gotta wait 10 seconds with the DJI logo loading in the middle of your screen. Then you gotta go through the menu to AV in, and then finally you gotta actually turn the adapter for the goggles on to start the analog module up. That is a good 20 to 30 seconds of time whenever you wanna boot up. Now, couple that with the need to attach and detach 5 of the 6 antennas every time you're setting up and also packing down, because you don't want them to get damaged while you're traveling. Then add on the shocking battery life of maybe an hour and a half if you leave this on constantly. Yep, that does mean that you need to turn the goggles off every time that they aren't in use, which then makes you have to perform the entire boot up sequence again. And yeah, we're talking a lot of wasted time here. To top it all off though, these are some hella bulky and heavy goggles that, it's both a pain in the ass for traveling and also just wearing in general. They hang off your head and they're kind of frustrating in that way. It really just makes my original perk of not needing to buy another pair of goggles become severely outweighed by all of these little minor issues. And I mean, hey, if I just ended up selling the V2s, I probably would have had enough money to go and buy myself a new pair of analog goggles, or even HD0 goggles, which are specific for what I want. Alrighty, next up is yet another DJI product. Look, I swear, I'm not against DJI, and I do actually use many of their products in my day-to-day job, but the DJI Remote 2 is simply just not one of them. Coming in at about $200, this was one of my most anticipated purchases, specifically bought for my first overseas trip with the Avata. At the start of this year, I ordered the Avata ProView combo with a separate Remote 2 on back order due to it being out of stock everywhere in New Zealand. It took about 60 days to finally come back into stock and get into my hand, which was pretty good timing considering I was due to leave for a trip to Bali in about a month's time. Unfortunately, however, it was not everything that I had hoped for, and instead of leaving me filled with joy, it actually left me drained of confidence. Now, after a few good weeks of practice, I could not shake the feeling of having way less confidence and control while flying with such a small controller. Now, I'm not sure if that's because I'm so used to flying with a full-size gimbal with the TX16S, or if it's simply because the Avata that I was flying at the time just was underpowered or something. Who knows? Whatever it was though, I just could not fall in love with using it. It doesn't fit in my hands that well, the gimbal throw feels very limited, and the sticks do partially unscrew themselves when you're flying, which really is no fun at all. Because I bought it for its travel size specifically though, I did end up taking it with me and using it in Bali, which was seriously fantastic for what it was. Sadly though, since I've been back in New Zealand, I've actually really struggled to have the want or will to take the Avata out and fly it, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that I don't like this controller. Okay, so let's roll back time a couple of years, back to June of 2021. This was another one of those purchases that I thought would be absolutely revolutionary at first, only to slowly continue disappointing me over time. What I'm talking about here cost me $450 and is called the iFlight Bumblebee. This was my second ever FPV drone after my Tiny Hawk Freestyle 2, and so I was really excited to finally have a bigger FPV drone for the first time ever. Now, because I was quite a noob back when I purchased it, I didn't actually understand the concept of cine whoops versus open prop drones and thought they were all kind of just one of the same. If you are like I was then and you think the same thing, there are a few key differences between the two, some of which ultimately led to me selling the Bumblebee in favor of a new open prop FPV drone. Firstly though, is a seemingly obvious one, and it's the fact that we have prop guards and prop ducts. Now, why is this an issue, you may be wondering? Well, you see, the way a drone flies is super dependent on how the props deliver the power from the motors to propel and maneuver yourself through the air. When you introduce prop guards, but more importantly prop ducts, you have to understand that this will make the drone have significantly more resistance while flying, and will also make the drone a whole lot less stable, you know, when it gets stuck in its own prop wash. I had multiple instances where the drone literally fell out of the sky after I dropped the throttle and then applied the power again, only for the props to not be able to create enough downward thrust to be able to keep the drone in the sky through its prop wash. Now, this sort of thing would not actually be an issue if I'd planned on flying it the way that it was intended to be flown, which happens to be slower, cruisier, and kind of swooping vibes, or even indoors. However, I wanted to freestyle it and move it around like I had been with my Tiny Hawk, just, you know, with the added benefit of carrying a GoPro on board. Obviously, that's not quite the case. After a few months of owning it, I felt like I had really outgrown it and was kind of pushing the limits with every single flight, just flying normally. So at the end of it all, I sold it and was just left disappointed by city whoops in general, even though it was probably more of a me thing than it was a drone thing. Anyways, coming back to the present day again, it's time for me to shit on DJI for the third time in this video. I'm kidding. Well, kind of. But look, I seriously cannot stress enough here, please. I'm not doing this for the traditional culture of FPV pilots shitting on DJI. I am literally using their HD system in quite a few of my drones. I'm even using their damn mic right now. These are just my personal opinions based off of my personal experience with these particular products. No anti-DJI bias involved here, okay? Now, what is this fourth most expensive product that I regret buying? This may come as a little bit of a surprise to some, as I have actually praised this purchase highly and will still continue to do so, but it's the DJI Avata. Coming in as a $620 regrettable purchase. As I mentioned earlier, I bought this drone along with the Remote 2 specifically to take overseas as a compact travel drone. And look, with all due respect, it has certainly served its purpose, allowed me to pack like super lightweight and also get some really epic FPV footage while I was overseas. But, and this is a big but, that is the only time that I've ever really felt like I was getting my money's worth with it. Every time since then, whenever I try to fly it in a situation where I could have been flying any of my other drones, I always find myself feeling like I'm missing out on those features from the other drones. The first reason comes straight back to the Remote 2, and that's the fact that it's actually the only remote that you're able to use with this drone. I honestly feel like I might love this drone simply if I were able to slap Crossfire into it and hook it up to a TX16S, but nope, Of course, DJI is taking the Apple ecosystem approach here and make it 100% impossible with their proprietary software and hardware limitations, meaning it's DJI's way or the highway. The second thing that really puts this drone in the Regrettable's purchase box for me is the flight performance, or lack thereof. For the most part, this drone does fly really well and I do enjoy flying it, but my entire confidence in the drone itself depletes the moment that I make any form of a sharper yaw turn. The Avata is now well known for its yaw issue, where a hard yaw turn will flip the drone upside down and propel it into the ground at pretty much full speed. I've actually had this happen plenty of times, and to put some icing on the cake, we even had 2 flyaways now where the drone is flipped, hit the ground hard, and then just sort of bounced back up and continued to fly away into the sky at full throttle. My only saving grace both times though was the fact that when this drone was full throttling away, it actually depleted the battery faster, making it switch to low battery and then activating the return to home function. I swear that there was no other possible way to get the control back from the drone other than that automatic process. So with these 2 unforeseen issues that DJI still have not fixed, I have no confidence in flying this anywhere that there is some form of risk involved if, the drone were to lose control, flip out, whatever. It sadly makes it a very unreliable drone in my books. It's also loud as hell, but I could probably forget that if it was problem-free. Now, not everything is doom and gloom though, because believe it or not, you've just completed the longest module of the day, so holy crap, good on you, absolutely smashing through this. I wish that I'd had this entire video when I was getting started. It would have saved me so much time and money, but hey, I guess without all those mistakes that I made, I wouldn't actually have the content to make for you. So yeah, maybe it's a good thing. In saying all that though, not everything that I've done has actually been a mistake. Sounds really sad, but I have surprisingly made some good purchases, found methods that explode your FPV skills, and legit tens upon tens of secrets that have helped me level up my own FPV drone journey. So that's exactly what I'm going to show you in this module, how to get on the journey of improvement and make good decisions. In this first video, we go through cheap FPV drone gear that I've bought and freaking love. In fact, some of these purchases have been so good that they've actually changed how I fly FPV drones altogether. So let's get you up to speed with some juicy upgrades. In the past, I have made multiple videos covering my gear, my experiences, and just my overall FPV journey. But today, I want to talk about 6 products that have genuinely changed the hobby for good. First up, we have these, not the controller as these, but these little guys. These are the 533 ripsticks. At the start of this year, I attended a drone racing event called New Zealand Opens, and while I was there, I couldn't help but notice multiple pilots were using these little weird blue things on their remote sticks. Once I looked into it a little bit and asked around, I found out that they were all some version of the 533 ripsticks, which are basically a super grippy stick end for your remote. So to try them out, I ordered a pair for myself, and honestly, from the second that I took them out of the packaging, I just knew instantly that they were going to be amazing, simply by the insane amount that my fingers actually stuck to them. I literally sat there, just fiddling with them, purely amazed. It's really hard to explain just how these feel until you actually try them in real life, but after flying with them now for over half a year, I seriously swear by them. It doesn't matter if you're flying in the heat and you start to get those sweaty little fingertips, or if it's extremely cold and you can barely feel your hands. These little sticks are gonna save you and make sure that your fingers never leave the sticks. I love them, and better yet, they're only 10 bucks. All right, next we actually move on to the back of the controller. This one is a little bit more niche to the controller that you're using. However, you may find that yours has the option for this too. When I first bought this controller, the Radiomaster TX16S, I bought 2 18650 batteries to power it. For the most part, they did do a great job and they charged via the USB port on the controller, so it felt like they were practically built in. However, after a few months of use, the USB port stopped charging the batteries and I was forced to purchase an external charger to be able to charge them. This now introduced the slight inconvenience that I couldn't charge on the go. They also took forever to charge, and if I forgot the specific charger for them, I would be completely out of luck. They did last for a reasonable amount of time, however, as all batteries do, they started to age and they lost a good probably 50% of their capacity over the period of 2 years. My replacement for them, however, has been an absolute game changer. This right here is the 5000 milliamp hour 2S battery from G&B, and honestly, couldn't be much happier with it. It solves my issue of aged batteries, which you would totally expect being a brand new battery, but it also solved all of my charging issues as well. I can now charge it at 5 amps, meaning it's fully charged and ready to go in around about an hour. I'll always have a charger with me as it charges from my normal LiPo charger, and honestly, it lasts so much longer than I even need it to, so I can forget about needing to turn it off during the day of flying and still be left with like, I don't know, plenty to spare. It's 20 bucks and simply makes my life easier. Next is my Goggles 2 strap. Starting off with the DJI Goggles V2, I've always been used to having a battery running from my head to my pocket. Most of the time, it never really worried me. However, the more I used it, the more annoying it became. And I even stumbled across a few instances where I managed to unplug the battery entirely while flying, resulting in a complete loss of video feed and ultimately in a crashed drone. It wasn't a regular occurrence at all, but the thought of making sure not to catch the cable on anything was always in the back of my mind while flying, which is never really a good thing to have to be thinking about. Regardless, I never did anything about it and bought myself a pair of the Goggles 2. Different pair of goggles, same problem. This time though, the battery did come with the bonus of having a little small clip on it, which means, you couldn't really unplug the battery accidentally. However, the cable getting in the way of my fingers was still an issue while flying. Cue the Ethics Goggle Strap HD. This thing holds a battery in this little grippy pouch here on the side of your head, which in turn allows you to keep it out of the way and also tuck the cable behind your shoulder as well. It also happens to allow me to put my controller's lanyard over my neck whilst having the goggles on, which I do a lot more than I realize. Beforehand, I'd have to put the controller down, take the goggles off my head, and then put the lanyard over again before putting the goggles back on. As a whole, I can see that it doesn't really seem like a big deal, but once you've used it, it's really hard to come back from the convenience. Alrighty, this one is simply something I just don't know why I didn't happen to purchase it earlier. Ever since I was driving RC cars, which must have been a good 10 years ago or so now, I have had this exact charger with a really crappy wall plug that maxes out at like 2 amps an hour output. It has been a workhorse to last this long, yes, but technology has happened to have evolved dramatically since I bought it, and I've actually started to question its honest reliability. So, in order to avoid any potential issues and to also play on the safe side, I bought the ISD Q6 Nano Charger. This is a $30 charger that not only has all the usual features that my classic 4-button one has, but it also includes a few super important other ones. Not only is it simply just a smaller package with the XT60 built into it, along with a balanced lead plug of course, but it also monitors all the individual cells of the battery. That was something that I severely underestimated with my previous charger not having it. For example, I noticed that there have been a couple of batteries with a lower cell voltage in one of the cells, which means that it most likely is damaged. It's really important to be able to know when your LiPo battery is damaged, as at the end of the day, they're actually dangerous batteries and can cause life-changing damage if something goes wrong. For me right now though, these damaged batteries still charge okay. However, I now make sure I am super aware of when they're charging and also have them ready to go outside at a moment's notice if they start to puff up or, I don't know, look like they're going to explode. I actually can't stress enough just how much I overlooked this for the past 2 years and how I'd recommend, highly recommend actually, that anyone charging LiPos knows how to charge them and also buys a charger that lets you monitor their health. Anyways, combine that charger upgrade with the biggest time saver that I have ever purchased in the hobby, and that is a power supply. Now, this is not your usual power supply and there are definitely better options than this one online. However, this is an LED light driver which delivers up to 8 amps, which is a solid 6 more amps than my 2 amp wall plug from before. So it cuts my charging time down from a solid 3 to 4 hours to charge 5 batteries to now being able to charge the exact same 5 batteries in just over an hour. It's genuinely 400 times faster in most circumstances, and when you really need to quickly charge up a few packs to head out with your mates, it can actually be the difference between being able to fly and not. So when you combine the safety elements of the ISDT charger along with the speed increase of charging time from, a actual proper power supply, I think that this has truly been one of the most worthwhile small investments I've made in the past 2 years. Okay, so I was a little reluctant to put these ones into the video as I straight up did not purchase them. However, if I managed to lose one of them, I would happily purchase another simply because of how much I actually rely on them now. What I'm talking about here is a lanyard for your remote. This first one here is an Emax version and in my opinion is too small to be super comfy, but hey, for someone smaller than me, this would probably be absolutely perfect. I'm 6'2" by the way, if that's any help. For me, however, the Luma lanyard strap is absolutely perfect. I went from being that guy who literally could not fly without needing to sit down to now actually preferring to stand up and fly. From the number of times the ground has been wet or the reception gets blocked from being down too low, having the ability to stand up and fly has made things way easier instead of having to sit down and get a wet butt. It could very well be a placebo here, but I seriously believe that my flying became a whole lot smoother and also more dialed in after using a lanyard. It gives you the chance to fly having your arms sitting in the exact same place, making the mind to muscle movement way easier for remembering specific tricks, and just flight in general. They're like 10 bucks, super convenient, and honestly, pretty damn comfy, so for the sake of trial and error, there really is no reason to not give it a try and see if it works for you too. Speaking of game changing, if you're someone like me who crashed their drone into the ground 500,000 times, you might know a little something called damage. If somehow you aren't aware of what that is, it's in very simple terms, breaking. Thankfully, for me, I've been flying this, the iFlight Nazgul Evoke, for the past 2 years, and honestly, couldn't speak much more highly of it as it's just been an unbelievably durable drone. Like, on a real level here, there have only been, I think, 2 things that I've needed to replace on it. The first being very normal, and that's the propellers, whereas the second is this little antenna back here. Well, in saying that, this is the replacement for what used to be on here. The original antenna for the DJI Air unit is a bendy antenna made by DJI that works perfectly fine, but from my experience of crashing, is very prone to damage, which makes sense considering it's just a bendy, thin piece sticking out the back of a quad. Anyways, once it reached this literal breaking point, I needed a replacement, and after looking online, I found one easily, but for a few more dollars, I could upgrade, which is what I decided to do. For the most part, these iFlight stubby antennas do the exact same job as the previous antenna, but with the benefit of not being able to snap. Generally, I've heard people tend to prefer having a longer antenna as it provides a bit more range. However, in this instance, I have not had any form of noticeable decrease in performance. It's 14 bucks and it actually comes in a 2-pack, so you keep a spare like I have, or put it on another quad.
So with these lovely cheap upgrades now a part of your arsenal, you'll need to actually put them to work. I do want to say as well, since making that last video, I've actually switched over to just using AG01 gimbal sticks instead of the rip sticks, as they're super grippy and they dig into my fingers a ton. I've also temporarily stopped using a neck strap for my flying currently. I'm trying to train myself to stand and fly without it. Honestly, there is no good reason for this other than giving myself the option to fly in a slightly different way. I guess it would also save me if I couldn't sit down to fly but also forgot to pack my neck strap, so yeah. Personal preference, but honestly, I'll probably go back to the neck strap in the near future. Speaking of the future though, this next video is going to get you set up with an unfair advantage for progression. You'll learn my 3 secrets that will ensure you start getting ahead of the competition and help you master your drone as soon as possible. This video contains 3 FPV secrets that when learned will explode your FPV piloting skills and simply give you way more joy while flying too. So if that doesn't sound like you, then now's the time to go and watch something else. Bye-bye. But if you do want these secrets, then let's be honest, why wouldn't you? You're going to learn from today's video what the heck they are, how you can easily use them to start seeing results for yourself, and what else is inside the big old book of secrets. So let's open it on up. Secret number 1. This first one will seriously unlock skills that you didn't know that you already had just by making them more accessible. Okay, but how the heck do you access skills that you didn't even know that you had? Well, I am stoked that you asked, because all you gotta do is follow these 3 steps. The first is a physical change on your drone, where in some cases you'll need a small hex driver, but for many you'll just be able to use your finger. What we're doing here is taking our camera angle from whatever it is at and bringing it down much closer to a flat angle. This is going to have 2 major effects on the way that you control your drone, with the first being decreased speed, as now you can't tilt the drone as much without staring face to face with the ground. The extra power that used to go into your forward movement, however, now gets transferred into your throttle ascent and descent speed, so you're going to quickly notice that you have to pay even closer attention to the already difficult throttle stick, as the up and down sensitivity is going to be so much higher with the additional power that's going there. Bruh. If you stop here though, you wouldn't have unlocked anything other than a world of frustration and pain, so you'll need to make sure you follow along with these next 2 steps as well. Step 2 is within our lovely friend Betaflight. Head down to the PID tuning tab and then over to the rate profile settings. Now, don't start sweating like a runner. There's no need to worry. We aren't going to be doing anything difficult or complex here. Instead, we're simply clicking on the little drop-down menu under throttle limit and changing it to scale. Then if we go to the right a little bit under throttle limit percentage, we're going to change that number from 100 to 70. Effectively, what we've just done now is reduce the power of our drone by about 30%, so that means you physically will not be able to push your drone past 70% of its full power. You're going to see why this is so useful in just a moment, but before that, we have step 3 to complete, which thankfully is the setting right below, and it's called Throttle Expo. We're going to change this number to 0.2 if you're pretty confident with your throttle control already, or
0.5 and above if you think that you could actually do with some more finessing. The lighter your drone is, the more you're going to want to have some more throttle expo, as what it's doing is it's flattening out the zone in the middle where your throttle stick would usually sit and making it so that it's less responsive to micro adjustments in that middle range. This will drastically help you on tiny whoops where they have a super sensitive throttle range thanks to their super lightweight design. So by now, you might be wondering, what the heck are these three changes gonna do other than limit your drone's power, speed, and responsiveness? And well, the answer to that is giving you more control. Imagine you're trying to learn to drive a car, right? Think of a full-powered drone with no limitations on it as being similar to that of a sports car. While you might understand the basics of driving a car, the controls of the sports car are just so precise, fast, and powerful that you simply can't control the car smoothly at all. Now, take your newly limited drone and compare it to the likes of a Honda Odyssey. Yeah, one of these things. It's not going to get you anywhere fast, you aren't going to have instant throttle launches, and you'll be more likely to be able to learn to drive a lot faster and smoother in it. So, secret number one is slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. Alrighty, let's get on to the next, secret number two. Now look, if you're anything like me, and well, probably every other person that I actually know, you'd be pretty excited to hear that there is a way to generate free time for yourself to get out and fly. I know that when I unlocked this secret for the first time, it really did open up a whole new world of possibilities, as I just found myself able to fly way more often and in turn have so much more fun. So what the heck is this secret time generator and how do you get it? To be able to understand how the time generator works, we first need to figure out exactly what is limiting our time so much in the first place. Obviously, this is going to be completely different for everyone, as some have family commitments, others have work during every daylight hour, and others have to organize transport to go to a flying location. Whatever your reason is though, it's totally okay. But what we do know for sure is that remembering to charge up your batteries, packing your goggles, remote, antennas, spare propellers, tools, cables, and all of that jazz is really just one of the biggest time issues that we all face. So for the first half of the time generator, we need to eliminate this issue entirely. And for me, that comes in the form of a ready-to-fly whoop kit. Most smaller tiny whoop kits, whether it's a ready-to-buy kit off the shelf or whether you've actually put the kit together yourself, they've got pretty bomb-proof drones that hold up to a lot of abuse, meaning you aren't going to be needing to fix your drone and having to remember the spare parts on the packing list. Alongside that, nearly everything's going to be able to be charged up with a USB cable and will have built-in batteries, so it's going to be pretty damn hard to forget to pack or charge them. And finally, things are just going to work together seamlessly. This was probably one of the biggest changes for me that the DJI Avata has given. Like, yes, I know that it's not the best drone for like most flying scenarios, and yes, it is expensive if I do happen to break it. Haven't done that yet, but let's hope I don't. But it all charges fast with a USB cable, and all I need to remember to actually bring along with me is the controller, goggles, and drone. Nothing else. But what's the other half of this time generator, you might be wondering, right? Well, this part is totally free and requires nothing other than either the calendar app on your phone or some pen and paper. You see, alongside this YouTube channel, I also run a video marketing company that requires me to go out to different locations pretty much every day. The way I remember when my bookings are and when I need to be going out to a job is by simply having a calendar with everything in it. Now, when I say everything, I mean literally everything. If I've got a date night coming up, that goes into my calendar. If I have a gym day, that goes in as well. And if I need to have a day off, guess where it goes? In my calendar. Now, this level of organization is not for most people, and look, that's totally a-okay, but you can absolutely use it to book some time out for yourself on a certain day to go out and fly. Once you've tried a few different days and times, just make it into a non-negotiable commitment to yourself that allows you the freedom of, say, 2 hours or an hour to either be alone or with your friends and do the thing that you love doing, flying FPV drones. I promise you that you'll soon be able to find that time every week that you thought you originally didn't have, just by simply making your hobby time an integral part of your routine. In the long run, you're going to be happier for it, and you're going to be able to put that positive energy right back into the rest of your busy schedule, making every day so much better than before. So secret number 2 is make time for the things that make you feel alive. Now, for secret number 3, which is possibly one of the more underrated things that took me forever to learn about, but once I had it locked in, made finding amazing locations so freaking easy. All you need access to for this is either a phone or a computer with internet, which by the fact that you're watching this video, I'm gonna presume that you have. Hey, do let me know though if you're watching this on a smart fridge or something dope, because that would just be insanely cool. Anyways, I'm gonna do this on my phone as it's something that you can do anytime and anywhere, but just before I can show you what to actually do on the phone, you first need to understand what we are looking for in an amazing flying location. Obviously, every location is going to be great for some and terrible for others, depending on your style of flying that you're actually going after. For now though, I'll keep it pretty generic so that there's options for pretty much every type of pilot. Honestly, instead of listing out a bunch of good locations, it's just going to be so much easier to list out places that make for bad locations, such as busy tourist traps, privately owned land, mirror calm water. I don't know why I'd need to mention that at all. Oh yeah, that's right. Bird dense areas, scraggly bushes, and tall grass are also on the no-go list for me. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few other bad locations for yourself depending on whereabouts you live in the world, but you get the idea behind it, right? So with that in mind, we now know the good locations are actually pretty abundant, and all we need is a method to find them, and that's when we go right back to the phone or computer. You've probably played around with this app before when you got bored in school or just wanted to explore the world a bit, and it's called the metaverse. I'm kidding, it's not the metaverse, it is Google Earth. Now, before you write this as a waste of your time, it does take some effort, but by searching up terms like abandoned or just simply finding interesting looking landscapes nearby to you, you can literally start to see if it's actually a feasible flying location or not. Simply drag and drop this little person icon anywhere you think could be a cool place to fly, and you'll get a 3D view of what the terrain is really like. Sometimes you'll even be able to find actual photos of the locations if others have been there before you. Now, obviously, all of this freedom isn't quite the same as real life, and so here in New Zealand, I use a separate app called AirShare, which shows you aerodromes, military land, and that sort of legal thing so that you know where you can and can't fly. Most countries, I'm sure, have their own apps, so I'd urge you to utilize that as well before you just head on out to a Google Earth location. So now, if those secrets only take up 3 pages of this book, then what the heck else is inside of it? Well look, I didn't want to overwhelm you at first, but now that you know and understand just how simple these secrets are to use, I'm going to take you through the rest of the book. I've got another 50, yes, 50 secrets to share with you, all of which I've either learned through my own trial and error or by being taught it from someone who is a way better pilot than I am. So, without further ado, here's another 50 secrets to get you even further ahead of the game. Everybody knows they can check their DVR when they crash to see where they landed, but nobody seems to mention that with the Avata, if you go here in the app, you can see exactly where your drone's last known location was. Or when you're out in the field flying and suddenly need the complete Betaflight configurator, instead of going home to your computer, you can use the SpeedyBee app on your phone to connect up and change whatever you need. If you're trying to show off your drone's LEDs to your mates, you can change this setting in Betaflight to cycle through different colors as you change your throttle. Anyway, today I'm going to try and give you 50 FPV drone tips that I wish I knew earlier in just 15 minutes. We're going to go from everyday tips to filming tips and even tackle some Betaflight commands that have actually changed the way that I fly. That's one tip every 18 seconds, by the way, so I should probably end this intro and get on into it. Okay, if you're getting into the hobby or know someone who is, there's 2 super easy things to adjust that'll make flying so much easier to get the hang of. Head into Betaflight Configurator, down to pitch tuning, rate profiles, and find that little box called throttle limit. Simply put in a percentage of how much power you want your drone to have. I'd say limiting more at first is an easier route, something like 70%. That's going to cap your drone's power to whatever you set that number to, making throttle control that little bit easier. Another one that is super helpful to beginners is under modes. If you scroll down, you'll find a mode called Acro Trainer. Select this one as a full selection, hit save, and now it's active. This is going to give you full acro controls, however it does put a tilt limit on how far you can actually tilt the drone around. Flips and tricks just simply aren't possible with this mode on, but to get someone flying easier, it's definitely the way forward. While we're here, depending on your ground surface that you're flying on, activating flip over after crash mode is another lifesaver so you don't have to walk out onto the field or track to recover your drone. Simply flick a switch and roll it back over. You can find flip over after crash a few modes above the Acro Trainer mode. Set this to a switch so that you can still fly normally too. Now, what if you don't have access to a computer to make these changes? Well, aside from the earlier mentioned SpeedyBee app on your phone, you can actually access a very basic Betaflight menu directly inside your goggles. It's super easy too, just use this cheat code with your controller sticks. Throttle stick from the center to left yaw, and then at the same time also pitch forward with the other stick. Boom! No excuses for changing things out in the field now. Speaking of changing things though, if you've got an LED-enabled drone like the Nazgul Evoke, not only can you do what we mentioned earlier where you change the LEDs with the throttle, but you can also simply just set a new LED color and completely customize your drone. Simply go into LEDs, click into one of them, and then select the color that you want. Now this one's not super fun, but it is super useful. I've actually used it a few good times now. But if you've got different settings that you'd like to switch between quickly, you can actually set presets as favorites by clicking the star icon. Super handy if you switch between other people's custom rates or if you just set up drones a lot. Now, if you run the same battery capacity a lot, like on a tiny whoop, you can not only track how much power you have left with, numbers on your OSD, but also a dedicated battery bar that drains as your battery drains. It's such a cool graphic. Anyways, go to OSD, select battery usage, and then don't forget to save. Whew, how good. 10 down already. Let's keep on going though. Whilst we're in here, if you're running a pair of HD goggles like DJI, Walksnail, or HD0, you're actually blessed with having access to a much prettier OSD display rather than the classic analog one. If it's not already on for you, simply select video format and then hit HD. Alright, one last OSD thing. On DJI 03, you can swap out the original DJI setup and instead overlay Betaflight's much more detailed OSD. Go to your set of DJI goggles, head down to settings, display, and then select custom OSD on. Now just set up your HD OSD in Betaflight and you'll be on your way. Speaking of 03 units though, these 5 tips are going to make you an absolute master at cinematography straight out of camera. Right, head to settings, camera, advanced settings, and change the color profile to D-Log-M. This enables a 10-bit color which has millions more of colors in it. Yep, you've heard that right. Literal millions of colors. And it also allows you to get rid of that awful over-sharpened look too, which just doesn't look great, right? Next, head to the camera settings themselves. The first 2 things to lock is your shutter and ISO. By locking the shutter at either 1/60 or 1/20, you're now allowing motion blur to become visible while flying. By following suit and locking ISO, you're also not allowing your camera settings to change mid-flight, which can look pretty bad. Also, while we're within these camera settings, make sure you set your aspect ratio to 4:3. This allows for more flexibility in post-production and can let you reframe things like cars or people if you're tracking them. By now though, you'll more than likely be seeing a very white, bright screen. To counter all that extra light that we're now letting in manually, you're going to need to slap an ND filter on the front of your 03 unit. Pick one depending on the amount of daylight you have. For sunrises, you might only need an ND4, whereas for, the midday harsh sunlight, you're probably going to want an ND32. To top it all off and to really add the pizzazz to your footage, make sure EIS is turned off, which happens to be electronic image stabilization. And then later on, using either your phone or computer, run that footage through GyroFlow and smooth it the hell out. A little bonus of doing this too is that not only will you get silky smooth footage, but it also de-warps the lens too, making the final result a much nicer looking image. Flip all that on its head though, what if you don't care about cinematics and you just want to race? Well, thankfully there are 2 really easy ways to set up 2 completely different types of race courses. Take a traditional 5-inch drone initially. Want to practice racing but have no budget for actual race skates? Easy, just buy some cones and grab some pool noodles and mark out gaps to hit through a park with trees. What if you don't have the luxury of a massive safe flying space though? Great question. But it's even easier. Grab your tiny whoop and those pool noodles and then make mini features to hit. Upward sticking half noodles could be a fun little slalom. Curved noodles can become wall-mounted hoops. Honestly, there really are no limits, and if you put time into it, you can make a pretty cool lit up course like I did in a really tiny backyard. This DIY approach is what makes FPV so damn fun in the first place too, so it would actually be criminal to not run you through a few building tips that even a few months ago would have saved me so many headaches. Like, you know how you get that clear heat shrink with your VTX? Yeah, well, don't just leave it there because you figure you don't have a heat gun. Spoiler alert, I might have done that. Heck no, always use heat shrink, otherwise you're gonna short something out. Another common one I see a lot is using zip ties to hold your motor wires down. I used to do this as well. Unsurprisingly, it does work. The issue is though, on a hard crash, the zip ties can actually cut right through the motor wires and, well, that's gonna be more than a pain in the butt for you. If you're like I was and don't know soldering all too well, you'll be glad to hear that you weren't the only one struggling to solder down that negative battery wire onto your ESC. This is one of the most painfully annoying solders on the whole drone, but the easy fix here is to just ramp up the heat on your iron and you'll watch in real time as the pain disappears. Another one on that too is if you're trying to unsolder something, particularly an older solder joint with a bit of dust or something on it, you might find that it simply won't melt down. Easy fix again, pop a little bit of flux over it and just watch as it instantly cures your depression. I kind of feel like this is a bit of an advertisement, like watch as it instantly cures your depression. Okay, yeah, no, I don't think I've ever heard that in an advert actually. Anyway, when you're soldering those wires down, make sure you're not just leaving loose wires hanging around the place. Twist them up, then solder them so you, one, have a much tidier build, but two, it also lessens your interference. Win-win situation. Then finally for building, before you decide to plug your brand new drone into a battery, stop and use a damn smoke stopper. It's actually got the potential to save your entire stack if you've got something shorting out, so it's well worth the few extra dollars that you'd have to pay for it. Okay, we're halfway through. Deep breath in, long exhale out. Whew. It looks like we're going good for time, so let's keep on going. Another way to save your stack, particularly on a race drone, is to use something to protect the inside of your drone from crap getting into it. For that, just use a stack saver. It's a stretchy elastic band that keeps the muck away, and hey, it also looks cool as hell. What might not come across as cool as hell to your friends, however, is an ESC startup tune. This one is too long to show you exactly how to do it, but I've made a short video on it in the past and made my drone play the Crazy Frog tune whenever it started up. Super fun, until the next day, at which stage I was quite sick of it. With DJI goggles 2 or the Integras, there are some very cool features that I actually missed out on for the longest time. Hey, some might even be an option for non-DJI goggles as well. Firstly, you can change the display scale of your screen within your goggles. So if it looks like the edges are super blurry for your eyes, just make the display size a tad smaller, and now you've got a view of everything in perfect focus. On that note too, focus mode is an option to turn on within your transmission settings. When reception gets rough, instead of trying to prioritize the connection of your entire full camera view, it instead focuses on sending you through less quality on the outer edges and more quality in the center, which, hey, it could be the difference between a crash and just scraping free. So yeah, turn that one on. You can also turn this option here on, which will enhance your contrast and color, making for a way nicer flight, but only within the goggles. If you're lucky enough to have friends, you can link them into your flight using audience mode, which they can then tune into by wearing their goggles and watching you fly live. Or if you don't have the luxury of multiple pairs of goggles and your friends still want to watch, just hook up your phone to the goggles and head into the DJI app to watch the goggles feed live. Then, while you've got that phone plugged in, if you have a DJI controller, you can actually start playing the DJI simulator right there within the goggles themselves. It's way more immersive than playing a sim on the computer or watching it on your phone screen, plus you can kind of take it anywhere as you don't need to carry a whole laptop with you for it. But what if you don't have the DJI controller? What other things are there to know? Quite a few actually. Did you know you can use a PlayStation or Xbox controller to connect up to most FPV simulators? This is going to be absolutely perfect if you threw your actual FPV controller across the room one day and smashed it to pieces. Anyone actually done that? I haven't, I'm genuinely asking you. Have you done that? Or if you simply don't have a proper controller yet, it's a fun way to get started. If you've had a controller for a while now though, and it has a screen like my TX16S here, there's a good chance you're missing out on a really cool feature. When I bought my TX16S, it came with OpenTX installed as a firmware. Natively, this is all controlled with the buttons and scroll wheel. Once you update it to EdgeTX, however, you find out that without knowing about it, your TX16S is at a touchscreen the entire time, and it was only software limited before. That blew my damn mind when I found that out. Now, have you ever had issues calibrating your sticks and found that no matter how many times you tried to roll them around in big circles, they always seem to be off again afterwards? Well, all you need to do is take a damn chill pill. Move each stick only to the ends of each axis without slamming them, and then boom, properly calibrated sticks. You can remove your stick ends and replace them with much grippier knobs. I personally love the 533 rip sticks. No matter how damn sweaty my fingertips get, they always keep my fingers locked on. You can also utilize that little loop on your controller and slap a lanyard attachment onto it. This was a game changer for me and allowed me to be able to stand up and fly easily, which is really damn helpful if you're flying from dirty or wet ground. Something else that has proven really useful to me out on the field is figuring out which way my props go on. Make the peace sign, start from the middle of the drone, and move outwards to find out which way the pitch of the propellers should be going. The upward pitch should always face the direction that the motor will be spinning at. Another propeller tip here is for small drones like a tiny whoop. Swapping out the stock 3-bladed propellers for 2-bladers significantly changes how the drone flies, and in my opinion is a much zippier and responsive flight. It's really nice for racing the whoops, and they're actually a lot easier to swap out when you need to replace them. Now, looking at the DJI Avata specifically, there are some really helpful hidden features that I've found out slowly as time goes on. Let's do a quick fire on the top 5. You can grab the drone from the top and flip it over to turn it off. You can switch over to manual, also known as full acro mode, mid-flight, and vice versa. Really handy for easy takeoffs. You can use head tracking to give you a whole new level of control and feel while flying. You can check inside your goggles what the last footage was before you crashed your drone. But taking a step back from DJI specific things, these 3 battery tips are almost guaranteed to save you some money. Before you fly, tuck that balance lead in between the XT60 cable and twist it to the side so it locks itself in there. Or use a secondary battery strap specifically to hold your balance lead out of the way of your propellers. Then, if you find that your XT60 connection is starting to come loose, grab something like a soldering iron tip and gently spread the connectors out on the drone's XT60 lead. It's going to be a whole lot more of a solid connection now. Alright, time is really starting to close in now, so last 3 tips, super quick fire. You can use your phone to connect with Wi-Fi directly to your ELRS receiver on your drone. That'll allow you to put your binding phrase in without a computer. Want to hand your drone off to a friend? Set your ELRS receiver into lone model mode, then have them bind up without changing your binding phrase. Now you want to watch what your friend is seeing, but you're on analog, no stress, just tune into the same channel as them and you'll be seeing exactly what they are too. You now know so much more than most people do when starting out with FPV drones. In fact, I would be willing to bet that you know more than I did after an entire year of being in the hobby. But look, it doesn't stop there. Obviously, the FPV drone hobby moves forward super fast, and that speed can make things confusing, annoying, and expensive. So if you want weekly exclusive methods, systems, and buying advice, you can sign up to the FPV newsletter in the description box below. But other than that, we'll see you again shortly.